Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to open this Polk County budget hearing today. It is April 1st, 2026. Everyone, all commissioners and a budget committee are present. So first order is election of our chair. Do we have a nominate for chair of the budget committee?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Johnson for chair.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to nominate Mr. Johnson as chair. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. So congratulations, Chair. And with that note, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you. Are there any nominations for vice chair? Nominate Blair, Mr. Watson. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there nominations for secretary?
I'll nominate Commissioner Gordon.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It's an honor.
Thank you. Next order of business is approval of the April 22nd and 23rd, 2025 budget hearing minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next order of business is to adopt the procedures and rules governing the budget process. Is there a motion?
Also move.
Second. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Hanson, budget message, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the Budget Committee, included in your packet is the budget message for the 26-27 fiscal year budget. It's the standard format that I've used the last few years. And actually, I think this is budget message number 30 for me. Maybe 31, but I think it's 30. You haven't heard the budget yet, so that's all the applause.
We've read.
We give you pre-applause, you'll do it nicely.
Oh, okay, I will try. The 26-27 overall budget message is you have a increase in general fund revenues that occurred in a number of different ways. You had a small decrease in FTE over what was adopted in last year's budget. You have other funds that are up and down depending on their funding. You have Public Works who saw a reduction in their funding. That is kind of a artificial reduction. If you remember last year, we assumed that there was going to be a transportation package that took effect January 1 of 2026. That obviously did not occur. We put in artificially about $1 million worth of funding to that budget to anticipate that. Most of it was in their contingency in that. So as a result, their budget is going down from what was adopted last year, but however, it's not going down realistically because we removed that revenue until there is a new transportation package, which may affect it up or down. We do not know at this time. You have decreases in behavioral health of a little over $2.5 million. And that trajectory for that fund is probably continuing to go down until we secured additional funding. Our two main funding sources, maybe three, if you call the feds, the state, and the CCO, all their revenues are down compared to what they were the prior year. We are looking at alternative ways to increase those revenues, which may stabilize that decrease, but I would not anticipate increases in those areas in the near future. So those are the two other big funds that we have. We have a number of funds that have been proposed to be at zero this upcoming year. Those include ARPA, coordinated housing, and actually the PERS Reserve Fund, which I use to offset some revenue shortfalls in the general fund and in Public Works and in behavioral health. The next part of the budget message basically gives you a 10-year rolling history of what was adopted in those budgets. If you look closely, most of those have increases in those budgets. We went beyond the 2013, 2014 dark days when we didn't have a public safety levy and didn't have 24-hour patrol and those things. So most of the 10-year history is more positive than negative. The next section of the budget message has property taxes. As a budget committee, you will approve both the permanent rate, which is 1.716 per thousand. That is the county's permanent rate. And then we have a current public safety levy at 49.5 cents. I will be recommending that we levy those amounts at its fullest so we can maximize revenues from those two sources. When you look at property taxes grow two different ways. Statutorily, assessed value grows at 3%. So you're almost guaranteed a 3% increase in your property tax revenue. And then all new buildings and new construction add on top of that. When things are really going well in the economy and in the housing market, that can add up to almost 2.5% more of an increase. Currently, we're at about a 0.5% increase. So overall taxes are going up at about 3.5%, which does not meet the needs of the county in the way of keeping up with the cost of operations at the county. Program changes and updates. I've kind of gone through that a little. I already mentioned that the general fund increased slightly and then decreased slightly in FTE. Public Works, I mentioned they had a decrease, but it was the result of not including the transportation package in the current budget. Health Services fund is going to be renamed to the FCO fund as Behavioral Health Administration is being pulled back in to behavioral health. So you will see the full cost of behavioral health this upcoming budget rather than having administration split out in health services. Public health is going to see an overall increase in budget. So that's positive. It will also not require a general fund transfer, which is another positive. For the general fund, behavioral health, I already mentioned, is reducing both in revenues. In FTE, it's increasing, but it actually is decreasing as we move the administration FTE into the budget. It had a total increase of 3.2, but you'll see a 14 FTE drop in the health services fund where administration was historically. So that's an artificial growth number that isn't real. So behavioral health saw really personnel FTE reductions. And then I mentioned the PERS fund that I think we incorporated in 3 years ago. We moved those funds appropriately from the PERS fund back into the general fund, public works fund, and behavioral health fund to add revenues to those funds. Revenues, as I mentioned, we saw a slight increase in the general fund, and I've basically gone over the changes in those other funds with their revenues and that. So I'd move to page 4. Gives you an overview of a bunch of the funds and that. I've already kind of gone through those. You'll see in the middle of the page, salaries and benefits. Currently, the county is in negotiations with 3 of our 4 labor unions. The Deputy Sheriff's Association, AFSCME, and FAPO. Those are the 3 biggest of our 4 bargaining units. So we do not have any of those labor agreements TA'd at this time. I will continue to give you updates as we meet again in May. We may have results in one or two of those bargaining units. PERS increase, this is a off year. We do not have any PERS increases. PERS increases every 2 years for employer rates. So the next one that we'll see an employer rate increase in is 27, 28. Usually those range from anywhere from about 2.5% all the way up to about 4.5%. And if you're wondering what 1% costs us in PERS, it's about $350,000. So a year from now, when we're talking about this budget, we will probably have a $1 million increase just to cover PERS liabilities and those kind of things. And then we have health insurance. Health insurance, my guess is for this year is going to be between 8 and 10%. I believe our Kaiser rates are going to go up almost 10% at 9.6%. So you can see that the cost of doing business, PERS, health insurance, wages outpace property taxes as we currently have. Internal charges, most of those have increases. In internal charges, very little increase in management services. We have increases in IT charges, rent, insurance, all those things. IT charges are still increasing at a rate that is very difficult to keep pace with. The cost associated with cybersecurity and data storage is very difficult. And you think you make good decisions 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 5 years ago. Well, those decisions catch up with you when it comes to data storage and that. They know they have you and they let you know they have you every year you try to renew maintenance for their product. So it's just the way business is conducted in the IT world now, and it's unfortunate, but it's a reality also. I believe just for data storage on our body cams for the sheriff's office, our maintenance was at $43,000 a year. They gave us notice this last year that they're going to honor the last year of our 3-year maintenance agreement at $43,000, but the next 2 years are going to be $78,000. So you see, 60, 80% increases in those costs. And we're hearing that all across the board when it comes to data storage and cloud-based data and that. So just to let you know, those costs are outpacing, again, property tax revenue. Capital outlay, very little capital outlay. Looking at one sheriff's vehicles, try to keep the fleet at a low mileage area. Public Works obviously is always our biggest capital outlay department. They're looking at probably a little over $1 million in capital outlay. That's mostly dump trucks and other items. There is some other things in their capital outlay, like land purchases budgeted that we might have to do for survey or road improvement type things. And then there's bike path improvements that also show up in capital outlay. There's a placeholder always in economic development for $700,000. That's just, it never occurs. This gives us the ability to go out for a community development block grant if something pops up that qualifies for that. And that way we don't have to do a supplemental budget in that. But historically, that hasn't occurred in well over a decade. So that's an artificial $700,000 in capital outlay. Building improvement has capital outlay in the amount of about $200,000 to address HVAC issues and those things. And then we have some additional money in capital outlay for Public Works Construction Fund. And that's kind of a placeholder in case they have a big ticket purchase. Most of the things that we did out there have been upgraded. So whether that occurs or not, don't know for sure. Transfers are obviously the biggest transfers that we have occur in the general fund, where the general fund is transferring monies out. Slight decrease in transfers in the general fund. As I mentioned, public health in the proposed budget has a transfer amount of zero. That kind of goes off and on. They do have some revenue monies that are coming in that they believe they're going to qualify for that is going to allow us not to have to transfer to public health. Transfer to the juvenile fund is increasing again, another $100,000. We will be transferring $1 million in the proposed budget to our juvenile program as costs associated with juvenile detention beds go up and then cost of employees. I believe our state funding for juvenile has been flat for the last 5 to 6 years. So any types of increases in those costs are being borne by the general fund. Then you have slight increase in the dog control fund. Then we have monies in the fair fund that we have for the 6 month operation. That's one thing I forgot to mention in the program changes for the fair. The fair fund is budgeted at a 6 month operation. Even though it has not been confirmed by the Board of Commissioners, there is the idea that we will put forth a operating levy in November for the fair. The amount of that levy is yet to be determined. That will be determined through the normal process, public hearings, and those things with the board. If successful, then funding for the fair, we will probably do a supplemental budget to fund the last 6 months of operations, and then you'll be, if successful, levy monies will then be available for the fair come the 27-28 budget. Failure of that levy in November most likely will result in the closing of the fairgrounds and figuring out in detail after that levy failure would be determining if how we go about that process. Haven't done a lot of work on that yet, hoping that I don't have to, but it is a reality. So that is how it's currently in our budget. The rest of the transfers are nothing new. Public Works transfers to the Public Works Construction Fund. The general fund does a little also on that. Management Services transfers to the Building Improvement Fund as a result of Management Services collecting rent from our internal departments, and then moves that money to the Building Improvement Fund. And then, as I mentioned, we moved and emptied the PERS reserve account this year and transferred monies back to the general fund and the Behavioral Health and Public Works Fund. Contingencies, you'll see that the general fund contingency decreased by almost $500,000. That's down from about almost 1.5 to almost $2 million 3 years ago. Our contingency was much bigger. You'll see in revenues, our beginning fund balance for the general fund has gone from 6.8 million 3 years ago down to 4 million this year. So we are eating up our reserves and eating up our starting monies in the general fund just to maintain services and trying not to delete FTE in the general fund because most of our departments in the general fund are at minimum staffing already, and there isn't really much area that we can cut FTE. Conclusion, not a rosy conclusion. Polk County is in a difficult position revenue-wise. Our ability to pay for costs associated with people and operations is not at the level that our revenues can meet. I gave you a couple of handouts just to describe where we kind of are compared to surrounding counties. The general public probably doesn't realize, even maybe legislators don't realize at the state level. They think all funding at the counties are the same. That is far from true. I gave you two sheets. One is an example of Marion, Lincoln, Yamhill, Benton, Tillamook, and Lynn. Those are the counties that surround us. You can see things that are different right off the bat. The permanent rate for counties, all those counties range from a little over $3 to a low of $1.27. Polk County's is, like I mentioned, $1.71. So we have a couple counties that have lower permanent rates than we do. One of those is Lynn County. They have the lowest permanent rate surrounding us at $1.27. However, they just passed an operating levy that is 2.5 times bigger than their permanent rate. They passed an operating levy at $3.06. That alone brings them $180 million worth of revenue over 4 years. So they're averaging $45 million additional revenue beyond the permanent rate in Lynn County. So as you can see, that generates a lot of total property tax revenue for themselves. Tillamook is the other one that doesn't have a permanent rate above Polk County's. They obviously have a much smaller population, and they also have their own forest revenue that supplants some of that, and that's why their permanent rate is so low. They didn't need to tax back when the permanent rate was determined, and so forth. One example is Benton County. They have a permanent rate that's about 49 cents higher than Polk County's. They also have a levy that is 80% higher than Polk County's. We are about 8,000 people difference in population, but they have twice as much property tax revenue as Polk County. So you can see that equality in property taxes doesn't exist in just our surrounding counties. The second sheet I gave you ties it down to just the 4 counties that are comparables to our deputy sheriff's office, Lincoln, Yamhill, Benton, and Lynn. Just looking at those 4 counties, they essentially have one more additional dollars in combination of permanent rate and levies than Polk County does. If we had that dollar additional, we would be getting $8.5 million more in property tax revenue. We probably wouldn't have the same discussion that I'm having right now with you guys if we had that kind of money. And I'm not advocating for that kind of money. There is that kind of difference, and we get beat up in negotiations. Well, they do it and they do it. And I go, I'd love to do it. I just don't have the money to do it. They do, and they have more than they may need. But that's their budget and their money, and how they spend it is up to them. So that is where we are. We have a public safety levy that's going to be coming up a year from now in May of 27. There's going to be increases in that public safety levy. What level? Don't know. That'll be a final board decision, but it's not going to be 49.5 cents. I guarantee that. Those are things that we have to work out as a county, and that the money isn't there, and unless there are major changes in how the state calculates, taxes, we're never going to be there. We're never going to be able to catch up anymore. I think we've done an incredible job with what we've had for so long, but those times aren't there anymore. And so with that, I can answer any questions. The remainder of the budget message is basically a bunch of charts and overall discussion of the whole proposed budget. I gave you bigger copies of the overall proposed budget for you to read easier when we get to that sheet. But overall, that's basically the state of the county. We are at a critical crossroads. Next year's budget without the passage of the public safety levy will be pretty devastating in the general fund. So more than happy to answer any questions you guys may have of me or where we are.
What's the state's unfunded liability on PERS these days?
Oh, that's, I think we're at about 48 million, which is better than most. A lot of counties have much larger unfunded liabilities than us. Some counties have smaller. Most of those counties that have smaller are either not in PERS or they sold bonds on the side to reduce their unfunded actuarial liability, but they're paying not in PERS rates. They're paying in basically bond rates in a different account to pay for that. So everyone is in kind of in the same boat. If you make major changes in your budget, I'll use Douglas County as an example. They decided for 4 or 5 years ago, I think, to contract out all of their behavioral health. So it's not under their budget, but because that was a big chunk of their payroll, your PERS rate is calculated on what they believe your payroll will take to pay off your unfunded actuarial liability. Their PERS rates, ours is a little over 30% right now. That includes the employer rate and the employee rate. Douglas County's is over 50%. Because if you take so much out of your payroll, it takes a lot more for what's left to pay off your debt. So, like I said, just like property tax rates, everyone's PERS rate is a little different across the board. Some counties have individual rates like Polk County, others are in the state pool. Once you join the state pool, you don't get a change back. So we've never joined that. We've kind of lived on our own merits rather than the pool. So, but yeah, we're at 48 million. My guess is 25 was a very good revenue year, at least in the stock market and investments. My guess is our unfunded actuarial liability will go down. That is also something that influences how the market does, kind of influences how your unfunded actuarial liability occurs. So my guess is our 48 may drop to 38. You're a function of actuarial assumptions in the stock market. You're never going to get out of this hole. They keep kind of kicking the can down, even if they assess that you really need a 6% increase in your employer rate. They don't do it. They just kind of kick that down the road and give you an increase of 3% because they know county, city budgets can't absorb that kind of increase in their PERS rates. So my guess is you won't see decreases in your PERS rates until mid-30s. Projections 10 years ago were you're going to be out of it by 28, 29, but it's probably 35 to 37 now. If you get bad stock market returns, it could be into the 40s or until all the tier 1 and tier 2 people die off. So got, you know, it eventually is going to even out. The current PERS is a defined benefits plan, a lot like traditional retirements are. And I think that covers what they're taking in, covers that adequately. You're basically paying for the past sins of decisions that were made by the PERS board in the 90s and in the early 2000s. All those people retire, and then you have to pay the piper. So
Oh, go ahead.
So I'm always big on trend lines. You gave us a 5.3% increase a year. I'm not sure that this wasn't a typo in that paragraph.
Might have
92 more employees in 2025.
we had compared to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So we have 92 more employees than we did.
Is that current 26 or is that, it says 2025?
It's
It's about the same.
It's 25 because basically I'm just looking at a 10-year history back. But
So I like those. And so I always like to,
the difference between 25 and 26 is
insignificant.
that.
So bottom line is 5.3%. Of course, that includes PERS.
That includes PERS and it includes health insurance, at least the overall total compensations for those.
And our legal rate of increase is 3%. We haven't seen any increases of any consequence in that 10-year period as well.
We had a few years that we broached before COVID at 5% increases in total property tax revenue. But on average, you're a little below 4 or right at 4
Yeah.
with the growth.
So for most anybody that's balancing a budget in the business world, when your cost of employees exceeds your revenues, you better start making some changes pretty soon, which I know you're doing. And that leads me to the question I have you to worked a trend line for contingency spend over the last 10 years. So I'm curious about, again, that's another indicator for me that if we're spending contingency, and perhaps we haven't, but I think we're starting to.
We have. Go ahead.
To see for everyone here to be able to see the trend line on the contingency spend in order to maintain employees. So I know we're in that spot today. We're spending some of that more than perhaps we have in the past, but I'm curious about whether or not you have an analysis on that.
So I've been here forever. You know, we are kind of at the precipice of where PERS was back in the 90s. We are at the cliff and we're about ready to fall off the cliff. Next year, without the passage of a public safety levy, you will probably lose 20 employees in the general fund alone. Obviously, different counties are a little different than other entities. You have siloed monies. Public Works, they're going to be fine in the long run. If there's a new transportation plan and we get additional monies, they'll be more than fine. The only danger that Public Works is in is if they recalculate the formula for gas tax, which is currently at 50% to ODOT, 30% to counties, 20% to cities. If they recalculate that or somehow, some way, then Public Works would be in a more difficult position. Normally in 26, we'd be going out for a road bond for Public Works. In 86, we did. In 2006, we did. Our roads are in excellent shape. We have the best road system in the state of Oregon for counties and statewide. And we aren't in a position to do a road bond. And that's because there have been substantial increases in gas tax in that 20-year history. But obviously you've heard the nightmares at the state level for ODOT. Cities are in dire need of repairs of their infrastructure and road system. They're crying for more money. I don't know how that's going to occur. without putting the burden on the back of the taxpayer. But Public Works for now is safe. They're good and that. Behavioral health was more than good. But we've begun to see usually in behavioral health in my history, there is a 8-year adjustment. It just seems like historically that's how it's been. We are now at about 12 years since we've had an adjustment in behavioral health funding, and you're beginning to see it now where funding and revenue for behavioral health was cut at the CCO level. That's just a funding source. Our CCO is made up of Polk and Marion County. It's money allocated by the state to that organization, and then they distribute it for fee of service and those kind of things. The federal funding for behavioral health is drying up. State funding's drying up. The state's trying to put more pressure on the counties to pick up things they don't want to do without giving us the money. We recently signed an agreement with the state for funding, but that was after 5 years of extensions because we couldn't agree. The counties held fast, which was a very positive thing statewide at the county level to push back hard on the state. But that 18-month agreement, we'll probably see extensions and extensions again because we're never going to agree on what the county should be doing and the state thinks we should be doing without giving us. They want us to take on more risk and not willing to pay for that risk. So, but as back to Commissioner Pope's statement, I did everything in this budget to maintain our level of service in the general fund. There is nothing left I can do. It probably scares Caitlin in the back over there of everything. She's called me on the phone more than once saying, what are we going to do? I go, there isn't an answer without more property tax revenue. And the only way you get that at the county level is through a levy. We can't adjust our permanent rate. We can't add $20 to our water and sewer bill that cities have the freedom to do without asking their voters. We have to ask the voters. We have to justify those property taxes. And if they don't see fit to pass whatever we put out on the table, there are going to be unfortunate, ugly consequences. And I don't like to threaten. I'm just telling you reality. It is going to be tough.
Mr. Hanson, what is the process to change the permanent rate?
Statewide vote, it's constitutional. So
Yeah, it's constitutional, measures 5 and 50.
It has to be an introduction of a sales tax. There's going to be some kind of vote. And if I'm the general public, I'm probably voting no, because I don't want to pay more taxes. It's tough out there and no one wants to pay more taxes, especially when they see things that are occurring. Things are getting worse, but yet they're asking for more. You could probably ask everyone in the room, what is going on with all these curb replacements in cities and along. They're spending $1 billion on that, almost, is my estimate. The public's going, why? You are asking for more money, but you're doing these kind of things. And again, that was determined by a judge. A lawsuit was put forth. Judge said, you have to do this. And, a whole bunch of money later, that's what you got to do. But the general public doesn't see that. I mean, they just look at waste, and government's good at wasting things. We try not to, but it's the reality.
I'd like to make a comment?
Go for it.
It was 29 years ago, I think,
Yeah.
when this committee in this room, because of you and what you brought up about PERS, the process here that changed the PERS program in the whole state, made some serious adjustments. Didn't solve it completely, but did make some adjustments that were important at that time.
Yeah.
So my point is, things can happen at this level.
You can put pressure at this level, but it's tough to get enough momentum. They didn't react to PERS quick enough. The writing was already on the wall and they didn't make changes. There were a lot of blunders back then and, I think they have finally fixed it, but the past sins you're paying for is devastating. Yeah, I helped initiate some of that, but I talked to the actuarial that was doing PERS and they were preaching out that, changes have to be made. And afterwards, I went up to him and said, it's already too late. He goes, I know, but I can't say that. I mean, it'll cause too big a panic, but that's what it took. It took lawsuits too. I mean, there were fights and, you have judges making decisions that affected them personally. Don't know if that was good or bad, but that was process. So I've been at this a long time. I feel I'm just trying to be honest here. I don't want to paint, a picture that isn't true, but this budget was as tough a budget as I've ever put together for the general fund. Public Works, I put that together in 15 minutes. It's easy when you have money or adequate funding. We're scrambling and we've pulled every, trick in the book out. There is nothing left to fix. We're at the mercy of the taxpayer actually, in this case, for a public safety levy.
And a very small question. I think the transfer to the domestic mediation has gone to zero.
That is because the state increased its funding twofold, maybe threefold, about a year ago, 2 years ago. The normal transfer was in the 40, 50,000 and it went to 120. Most of that is a pass-through money. We don't control that. We have fights with DOJ over it. We have to sign the contract. We say, just give it to the courts. They operate it. They choose the mediators and those kind of things. It requires Judge Hill and I to get on the phone and say, just do it. But it really should be included in the judicial budget, not ours, at least on how we operate it. Some counties run it completely and with the cooperation of the courts, but ours is basically run as a pass-through type of account. They pick the mediators, they're happy with the process, but yeah, we only had to do that when they overspent, and we did that 2 or 3 times. We always had a placeholder for it, but there's no need for it anymore.
Thank you. Other questions?
I'll just make a comment to your comment, Chair, on what is the solution. I think there are a lot of concepts out there to revise the tax system in Oregon. I found that leadership from both parties is very open to that conversation and hears cities and counties and their predicament. But I don't sense that they want to take on the political burden of that. So the Association of Oregon Counties is looking at a holistic analysis of each county's revenue challenges and situation. Not all counties are in dire straits, as you can see from this graph. But I do think that leadership across the board from the city up to the state needs to revise it. There is a I think, a theft of income taxes that are being centralized in Salem and Portland. And what we are doing constantly is defending our ability to finance mandated state funds where we're a political subdivision of the state. So we have to provide assessor's office, clerk's office, et cetera, and they are nickel and diming us, as Greg painfully explained. And we're advocating as an association, as a county, but it's ongoing. But I do think we are at a critical point for a large chunk of the state. So I hope we can find some consensus.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right. I believe that includes the budget message and our discussion of general fund revenues. And the next item on the agenda is clerk's office. Is that correct, Mr. Hanson?
That's what my agenda says. So yes, we usually start with the elected official budgets. Clerk being number one. Current county clerk is Kim Williams. She has two programs within her budget, recording budget and the elections budget. Recording is sometimes a revenue generator, and then sometimes it's expense eater. When things are going well in the recording arena for the clerk's office, we see revenues as high as, I think our peak was $800,000. We're currently at 50% of that at 400,000, and that's somewhat hopeful as hopefully interest rates come down. Staffing wise, in both the clerk's two programs, you'll see a quarter FTE. Reality is that's the person that we're sharing in another department. We have three people up in the clerk's office. We have the clerk herself and two full-time employees. We are probably the smallest clerk office this side of the mountains. Everyone else's clerk's office has more FTE than we do. Talking about minimum staffing, you can't really drop much below 3 and provide an office that provides both elections and recording opportunities. Recording is fairly automated in that. This is both budgets are pretty much status quo budgets, like I said. This is a mandatory function that we provide, and they do an incredible job with the number of employees that they have. I would put our elections quality up against any other counties. And then recording, we automated that a lot way back when, which has allowed us to keep things down, FTE down in that. But again, this is a mandatory program that we provide. It's a constitutional elected position. And I would recommend that both the recording budget and the elections budget be tentatively approved at the proposed amounts. Don't see much changes occurring in those over this next year. If interest rates do drop and you begin to see refinancing and that, you will see the revenues going up dramatically for that program, but can't guarantee that. So that's why it's budgeted at that $400,000 revenue.
Is there a motion to tentatively approve the budget for recordings and elections as proposed?
So moved.
Is there a second? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The proposed revenues and expenses of recordings and elections are tentatively approved.
If you had questions of the clerk, she's up watching it on video. But the next budget is the assessor's office. And she is in attendance down here. Valerie Patuan is the current county assessor. In her budget, you can see the program summary. You can see how things have, property taxes have grown over the years. You can see how assessed value has grown over the years. She can answer any technical questions you have in that realm. You have a budget that is has a reduction of 1 FTE. I let her know during the proposed budget, she had an unfilled position at the time, and told her that I was not going to be proposing filling that position. She didn't take that news with a smile, but she understood, and she understood where we were. And, I'm sure she might want to talk about getting that position back. However, in the proposed budget, this does have a reduction of 1 FTE. Again, this is beginning to try to trim back as much as we can in the general fund without doing the major cuts that will have to occur next year without the passage of the levy. So if you have any questions on the assessor's office, there has been a push, oh God, maybe for the last almost decade to get what is called assessment and taxation funding increased at the state level. They, 10 years ago, they barely got their name on the program. They were right at the starting line this time, but again, their funding never has changed. They've had committees to look at it and that. I think they're getting very close to getting additional funding. That additional funding is not in this budget. That additional funding is also probably going to have the caveat of not supplanting existing funding, and that's part of the reason that I reduced this, because if they do get additional funding through the legislature, building back that staff will then be permitted under the new increased revenues that they get. Yeah, we get about, originally it's called CAFA grant, and that we were getting about 35 cents on the dollar reimbursement for the costs associated with the assessment taxation process. That includes a little of clerks funding too, and some IT funding, but it's primarily the assessor and the tax collection are the two primary components of that funding. We're getting about less than 15 cents on the dollar now. So you can see the state's good at starting something and then letting it slide. And, our DAs used to be paid by the state, and then we used to have funding for part of them, and that's completely gone. So they whittle those things down and put the burden back on the taxpayer. Other than that, this is a status quo budget. This office is in my opinion, one of the finest in the state. We're current on the expectations of Department of Revenue. Again, when you look at size of departments, our assessor's office for our size and the number of accounts is about as small as any in the state. So again, we're doing more with less. We automated this department. Most of the counties now use the property tax system, or CATS, that was developed initially in Polk County. I think 2/3 of the counties are now using that software. So again, we were somewhat leaders in that automation component, and that's one way that Valerie and her department is able to run with as lean a staff as she is. She's more than welcome to make any comment she wants, if she does.
Any questions?
Excellent job running on a very lean budget. Thank you for all of your hard work. It's clear to me that you take this very seriously, appreciative of all that you do.
I would recommend tentative approval of this budget as is.
Is there a motion to tentatively approve the assessor's budget as proposed?
Move to tentatively approve.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Second. Thank you, Mr. Morthurst. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. The budget for the assessor is tentatively approved.
Next tab, we have the treasurer department. This is pretty much a status quo budget. We have an elected treasurer. We have a partial FTE staff in this budget. But overall, this is pretty much a status quo budget with minor changes in the costs associated with personal services. This is pretty much a minimal budget that you can have. Most of the duties associated with finance occur in our finance office. However, there are constitutional duties of the treasurer that are written in statute and that we're complying with. So I would recommend tentative approval of the treasurer's budget if you wish to make a motion on that.
There are motions to tentatively approve the treasurer's budget.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Morthurst. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 The treasurer's budget is tentatively approved.
The next program budget is tax collector. Our current tax collector is in the room. Caitlin DiAugustini is the county tax collector. This is the other main component of the A&T funding that we get from the state. We have no change. Well, we have minor change in the allotment of FTE associated with tax collection. The state recently modified how we are able to sell our tax foreclosed properties. That became a much more complicated system than we once had. We're working through those issues and that. But again, this is a pretty much a status quo budget, even though FTE look like it has increased. Budgetarily, we haven't added staff. We just reassigned staff to address those issues and that. So.
Is there a motion to tentatively approve the tax collector budget? We'll move.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Tax collector budget is tentatively approved.
The next budget is the district attorney budget. It is made up of prosecution, medical examiner, support enforcement, victims assistance. Those are all general fund programs. The other fund that he oversees is the CAMI fund, which is outside the general fund and is funded by separate monies that is provided by the state. I know the DA is here in person, and he probably will be addressing the budget committee on some requests that he has of you that I did not put in the proposed budget. Prosecution role is obviously to prosecute all criminal cases that come before them, and the FTE and everything, it is pretty much a status quo budget. There are needs within his office that he will probably want to address with you, which include the investigator position. There's also the medical examiner program budget that we currently have that may need modifications to address medical examiner needs program wise. Support enforcement is a program that we do. The state would do that. We get 2/3 of our funding from state and fed money associated with support enforcement. We could return that to the state. You're only going to save, like I said, 33 cents on the dollar for that program. But the product we produce compared to what the state produces is not comparable, and may not be in the best interest of those individuals utilizing the recovery of support enforcement monies that are due them, and that again, Aaron can address that with you. But like I said, all of these are pretty much status quo budgets. Victims assistance, we initially had fears that we were going to lose federal funding and a whole bunch of things involving that. Most of those monies are being returned to the county and that. So like I said, this is pretty much a status quo budget. He does have statistics and everything that you can read through, but overall, they do a very good job. I've heard compliments from the bench, which hasn't always been the case, that they are excited with how our prosecution team is working. The courts are not having issues, and that goes to the quality of Aaron and Matt Wilson as Chief Deputy DA, that they're putting out a product, and it's tough for us to compete. FTE wise, we tend to be a training ground for a lot of bigger counties that can offer higher wages. So we try to do the most that we can. We train them up, we give them trial experience, and sometimes they end up going to greener pastures. And we've just had to accept that. It's frustrating, I'm sure, for Aaron and his office, but that's the reality. And like I said, we don't have the ability to pay like others do. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron. I'll give up my seat to Aaron. Bring in a few more chairs if Matt wants to join. Yeah, right.
I'm sure you probably won too many chairs than wanting to join.
Well, I don't know if they want. We're back there.
We're here at the pleasure of the committee, as always. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Again, I'm Aaron Felton. I'm the district attorney for Polk County. And I appreciate being here at the invitation of the committee and Mr. Hanson allowing me a few minutes to cut into his presentation. And I promise I will not turn this into a state of the DA's office presentation, but I, of course, will answer any questions as best I can that the committee has. I say that because I'm very proud of your DA's office. I heard the comment about the grass being greener. I was trying to come up with a rhyme about the grass being green, something green in Polk. It came up, the grass is no joke in the Polk, because what we're working on is keeping good lawyers here in Polk County, and through work and consideration and support of our commission, we've been able to retain good lawyers here by working to keep salaries as best we can competitive. We also have a very cohesive group of attorneys that likes working in this office. I think likes working with one another, which is a key factor for keeping people here. We have an attorney in trial now. We have a new attorney in C4 right now, where we have Wednesday is our heaviest day in C, courtroom number 4. So we have hardworking attorneys. But we, in a period, I understand something, a couple things very, very well, is that what we're able to do currently, we're able to do for 2 reasons. One, that we have a public safety levy in Polk County that, as Mr. Hansen has pointed out in several points, we exist because the people of Polk County support public safety, and they're willing to dig a little deeper into their own pockets to pay a little bit more on top of their property taxes. And times have never been easy in Polk County for people. It's always hard to dig a little deeper, and people in Polk County have been willing to do that. I was here when the first public safety didn't go through, levy didn't go through. I was here the second time when it did go through, and Mr. Wilson, my chief deputy, who is here in the room, is here in our office because of the first public safety levy, when we were able to grow, add lawyers. But I've been here for a lot of these conversations, and the second reason that my office is able to go forward and be successful is because of the ongoing support of this committee, not without tough questioning over the years and thorough questioning, which is appropriate in the support of the budget. Courtroom success in law enforcement and public safety happens because of planning, happens because of the dry, detailed budget planning and strategy process that happens in this room. So I'm always been grateful for the thoughtful process that happens in this meeting. And so, yes, we don't have perhaps as much as others, but we do well with what we have. And I'm going to get to a couple of points. I have a couple of numbers I'd like to share with you, because I know it's not the state of the DA's office, but there are a couple of factors you ought to think about as you're looking at our budget, in addition to what you already have from Mr. Hansen. By the way, we're able to be successful because of some community partners, which is law enforcement. Sheriff Garten is here. He's emblematic of that agency, plus our other community agencies, our municipalities in Polk County, which are extremely supportive and collaborative of the work we do. Parole and probation is here as well. That's another community partner that supports the work we do, which helps us be successful in a huge component of what we're able to do in the courtroom and keeping our community safe post-conviction as well. So we're conscious that it's not just us. We're one part of the overall collaborative process. But right now, just for the state of things, referrals from all of our agencies are up this year. That means every referral from all the law enforcement agencies across the board. That's adult referrals. That's just reports coming in, gross reports, juvenile referrals, adult misdemeanors, felonies. All of those are increasing, and we're looking to be at or above the levels of last year. And we anticipate by the end of the year, we'll be well above last year's total referral numbers. From that, we file approximately 80% of the referrals we take into the office, and we take them to completion. We achieve guilty rates of some type. That's a plea of guilty, a no contest plea. We are at approximately 71% so far this year. Fiscal year is not done yet. We have a couple months yet to accumulate. Last fiscal year, we were at 80% of that. And that doesn't include child support cases, the death cases we review, probation violation cases, or juvenile cases either. That's just adult cases. And guilty verdicts we're getting in 80% of our cases. Probably the lowest statistic we have for courtroom cases is outright acquittals. We have other options, no contest, pleas, civil compromises, other results. So out and out guilty success rates were at 80% for last fiscal year. How busy are we right now? Just doing case counts, comparing one office to another, it's an impossible science. You know, sometimes statistics are like a magic show. You present them and people in the audience want to go, well, where's the trapdoor? What are you not showing us? And that sort of thing. I appreciate that because my question is always, what's the great so what about it? And what are you trying to say? So they're helpful to a certain degree. And we ran, at one point, Nathan Vasquez, my friend from Multnomah County, who's the district attorney up there who's doing a tremendous job up there. He ran some numbers for his office. He said in 2025, their office had 11,300 cases. They have 95 lawyers up there, okay? That's about 118.9 cases per attorney. Well, Mr. Wilson ran the same type of equation for our office. We had 1,141 cases for 8 attorneys, which worked out to 181 cases per attorney. So just proportionately, we're carrying more cases than the largest DA's office in the state. I just thought that was an interesting number. There are differences, of course, and distinctions, but our attorneys are very, very busy. In terms of the cases that they're carrying. And to bring it back to what I wanted to share with folks is that what do we need long-term for a growing county that's busy in terms of the business that we do? It's the investigator and the medical examiner position. We brought a presentation to this committee last year about why an investigator would help. We're still there. A full-time district attorney's investigator would help our office in terms of not only cost savings to law enforcement agencies, the sheriff's office, and other agencies in terms of follow-up, helping us on our cases in terms of what we do, our cases going to court would be a tremendous help in getting follow-up interviews, being a witness for us. It would be not only a cost savings, it would be a labor saving for our attorneys. And in terms of what they do in preparing for court, it would increase our efficiency. The medical examiner position is another position that we could look at improving. Right now, we pay total budget of approximately $60,000 towards that. It would be really, really helpful for us to increase that, to formally make that a full-time position or somehow enhance the pay so we could formalize that position rather than doing part-time people, kind of cobbling that together the way we have it right now. That's a secondary position because it's a state requirement that we have a medical or deputy medical examiner go out on our death calls. We work with that position all the time. All of us, all the attorneys in my office take after hours on call, myself included. When it's a death, we consult with the deputy medical examiner. And then even after that point, we have ongoing conversations. So it's a necessary position. If we had that person in our office full-time, that would be another help for us to do our job. And we really should be solidifying and professionalizing that position to a greater extent than we currently are. But the investigator position would be huge for us and would help us be better and be more efficient. And then the medical examiner position after that. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, I appreciate the ongoing support and consideration of this body. And I long-term, with a growing county, yeah, we probably need another lawyer down the road too. But I appreciate what the situation is financially. Yes, sir.
So
Commissioner Pope.
you don't have this investigator at this point, haven't had this investigator ever.
Not as long as I've been here, and I've been running this building since 1999.
But you've had cases, as you've been the district attorney, where that assistance is needed.
Yes.
And where does that come from?
We have had to call upon the law enforcement agency to make up the difference. And that means that we've had to ask the lead investigating officer, the detective, to do that follow-up work. And that often requires that detective to do work overtime, which hits the agency budget, of course. And that's where we've had to make up the difference. Sometimes we've had to ask a patrol person to do follow-up. It's overtime again. Where it pinches us is sometimes our schedules and a patrol person's schedule don't match. If they're working nights, they'll have to come in the morning off their night schedule to do that. It's overtime. They're not always available to our schedule to instantly do that. The other piece is, frankly, a law enforcement detective or patrol officer isn't trained necessarily to do investigations the way a district attorney's investigator is, who kind of knows what a prosecutor is looking for in a questioning situation or the rules of evidence or that sort of thing. They're able to do that. Plus, they're not necessarily able to do things like serve our subpoenas immediately and that sort of thing. They have to work within their own time schedule. So again, that's where the cost savings comes from, the time savings comes from, and also there's an element of strategy with our litigation as well.
Anything from the state? Anything assistance-wise come from the state to help a district attorney?
Well, if, for example, when we turn a case over to the state and they become a special prosecutor for us in those rare cases, then they can provide their assistance, but they just don't provide their team of 30 investigators that they have just to perform that role for us. It's not the same.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Do you see any trends in the types of cases you're seeing? Any changes that way?
Well, we looked at that and just the numbers we have to see if there was any increase in a particular category. And basically it was even across all categories. The increase in referrals is the same in all categories. They're all going up. I looked for that to see where would we prioritize if we had to. I couldn't pick one or the other. I mean, I prioritize based on, seriousness type if I had to, but no, I looked for that very same issue, sir, and it's even across all categories. Interesting. Yeah. Seeing no questions, but I'm always available for members of the committee for further questioning. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Felton. Just want to make a quick comment about the case count per attorney. When I was doing family law work, I kept my case count under 50. Now that I'm doing litigation work, I keep my case count under 10. Just by comparison, our attorneys are near 200 cases, just for comparison purposes. Is there a motion to tentatively approve the revenues and expenses of the district attorney's budgets, or do we, Mr. Hanson, do we need to do it budget by budget?
You can do it for prosecution, medical examiner support enforcement, victims assistance. CAMI, we have to do separate. And I didn't even talk about CAMI, but.
So moved.
Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The budget revenues and expenses are tentatively approved for prosecution, medical examiner support enforcement, and victims assistance.
The other fund that is overseen by the.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to put the investigator on the wish list.
I'll second that.
Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Mr. Pope.
Chair, could I also motion to put the full-time medical examiner on the wish list?
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Is there a second for that? We failed to have a second, so the medical examiner will not be on the wish list.
Let's make a comment too.
Go ahead, Mr. Gordon.
We are going to face unmet needs in our county right now in the public safety system, et cetera. And obviously this budget with the $1.5 million reduction in our beginning fund balance, there's really no place to take additional funds. However, with the public safety levy renewal conversations, as we build consensus as a county, and perhaps get some support from other agencies for certain asks that are more responsive to our community's needs, that's another avenue for a conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. I believe that, Mr. Hanson, are we going to talk about the CAMI fund and then?
Yeah, this was a fund that was created back in the 90s. This is a child abuse multidisciplinary type of fund. We get monies from the state to operate this. You can see that we have a budget that is grown recently. They've increased the amount of funding for this program at the state level. This is a program that you would have to approve both the revenues and the expenses for, but I'm recommending that we, most of the monies that we spend go to outside contracts and that. We do have a small amount of an FTE dedicated to the operating this program. But I would recommend tentative approval of the CAMI fund.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Mr. Hartman, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The revenues and expenses of the CAMI fund are tentatively approved. I see we have CASA on the
Yes,
agenda. Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, I will talk about CASA. CASA over the years has been supported and funded by the county. I think at the peak, we provided $25,000 in general fund transfer to the CASA program. They've done a very good job of trying to build their own funding in that. They still requested $12,000 for this upcoming year. I am proposing $0. That $12,000 would assist them in paying the rent that they are charged down where they are located near the academy building. In the past, last year, we approved $15,000 for this program. But this year, I'm proposing $0. And they know that, so.
Are there any comments about the CASA fund from the committee? I'll just make one brief comment. CASA is a very, very worthy cause, but given the financial condition of the county, I just don't see any way that we can do it.
That's, it by no means talks about the that it's not an important program. I think the work that they do is invaluable. I believe the courts would come down and say the same thing. Having child advocates is very important to the system and protecting those children from the rigors that they're going through to be part of that. But it's not an indication of how their program's doing. They've done a pretty good job in fundraising and developing monies. Finally, we've supported them for a long time. The goal when they went basically outside the DA's office was to be self-sustaining within 2 or 3 years. That's been over a decade, but I couldn't justify cutting positions in the county and continuing to support something that can support itself. They may have to tighten up some things, but they can do it.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. I believe that takes us to our morning break. I see that we are, we're just a couple of minutes. Oh,
Well, you don't have to because there's nothing proposed. But if you wanted to put a wish list, then, but if you're okay at $0, you don't really have to TA it.
right. Is there anybody want to put CASA on the wish list? With that, let's take our morning break. I see that we're about 3 minutes behind schedule, so we will come back at 10:33. It's such a good job. We are back on the record to continue the budget hearings. I believe, Mr. Hanson, we are talking about the sheriff's budget at this point.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is the sheriff's budget. He has 2 budgets that are within the general fund. They are the biggest 2 departments within the general fund. And then we have a separate fund in animal control that we provide a general fund transfer to. We'll go through patrol and the jail, the two big departments within the general fund. Like I said, these are the two largest funds with the most FTE in the general fund. This is pretty much for the sheriff's office, a status quo budget in the patrol, tried to keep FTE the same, and try to provide them the necessary materials and services to continue to do the fine work that they do. We did reduce the amount of capital outlay. I think the sheriff's office or sheriff requested 2 vehicles, which is normal and consistent. I reduced it down to $60,000 in one vehicle. That's probably more than the cost of one vehicle, but I did reduce it by one. The danger in reducing the number of vehicles you buy every year is you start to age out your fleet, and you really don't want patrol cars driving at the speeds that they have to drive at, sometimes nearing 200,000 miles. So we try to provide the adequate number of vehicle replacements in the sheriff's office. Usually it was a 3. We then went down to 2, and now we're down to 1. So we are beginning to reduce our ability to pay for operations within the sheriff's office in the patrol division. But like I said, just like you heard from Aaron, I'm sure how busy they are is increasing annually, and we kept the FTE the same this upcoming year. The jail is again a service that's provided for the whole county. We house both county inmates and city violators within our jail. We do at times rent out beds to other jurisdictions on contract to house people in our jail on a temporary basis. The budget for the jail is not much different than last year. The costs associated with operating the jail are somewhat increasing at a level that is difficult to address. Probably the biggest area of increase in the jail operations is the costs associated with medical, providing medical services within the jail, and providing and treating those that are incarcerated with high cost ailments is getting more and more difficult to deal with and address. Medication costs and procedures within the facility, or people within the facility needing procedures that require staffing to be on site when they're getting those things done, and that it's just those expenses are escalating at a level that is tough to keep up with. That's probably one of the biggest areas that we've seen increases over time on medical issues. I remember when it was, $400,000 or $500,000, we potentially could climb to as high as $1 million in just medical coverage within our facility. FTE wise, we're up 1 there, but that's because last year we actually had 35 and I miscalculated and only had 34 in the budget. So it shows on paper an increase, but in FTE, but it really isn't. The other things that we are not addressing in the jail is they need a new information system within the jail for operations, and that ours is antiquated and needs replacement. They have been looking around at that, but the ability to pay for a new jail management system is just not there right now. But it isn't something that we don't need. It's something we can't afford to have at this moment in time. Like I said, we don't really get assistance from anyone except for outside jail rental beds in the way of revenues and that. So these two budgets are just difficult to address. You can see that the costs associated between what was adopted last year and what is proposed this year is, $580,000. That's almost as much as the total property tax rate increase for the whole general fund. And that just shows up in the jail. So again, the cost of doing business far exceeds the amount of revenues that we're receiving inside our facility, and that, we have a lot, if you want statistics, it's easy to get statistics from your jail. We track everything in that. There is a long list of statistics in that. If you want to read them, you can. The sheriff is in person here. If you have questions of him, I'm sure he'd be more than willing to answer those if he wants to speak. You want to speak? Yeah. I'll turn it over to him just to let you know about it. We'll do the animal control budget after we tentatively approve the patrol and the jail budget. I'll turn it over to Sheriff Martin Garden.
Thank you. Just really quick, I just want to add a little context to the jail management system. I've been looking for a new system for the last 3-4 years. This is the second system I've had my entire time here. So in 25 years, we're on our second system. And the one we are currently on technically died several years ago. There are some stats that, and the ones you have in your folder here, that are very easily trackable. Then there are stats within the system that are not. We spend staff time running different reports, confirming it's the same number being spit out, because most times it's not. So there is just a lot of problems that we're having with the system. Plus, anytime it breaks, we have to pay for it. We have to pay for, if there's any kind of changes in that thing. So in the past, looking at several other popular jail management systems, your first year, you're looking at $150,000 to $200,000. And so I've just got to that point and then stopped, because that's not realistic for us. So, however, I did find a company that is mainly on the East Coast, that is basically, they can come in $38,000 for the first year. And the maintenance fees, which we currently pay maintenance fees about $17,000. This is only about $3,000 more than what I'm currently paying, except for that first upfront cost of $38,000 and some change. So I have been really trying to find the best value and being realistic too within our constraints. So I just at least wanted to throw that out there. This new jail management system also does have a EHR, an electronic health record, built into it. Ours currently sort of does, but it's not a true electronic health record. And so our medical staff are having to use multiple systems to get one thing done that they shouldn't have had to do. So that is another part of it. And then the other part that the other capital outlay that I did or requested was the 2 vehicles, total of 2 vehicles. In the capital outlay, it shows that I'm requesting 2, but it was sent in before Greg finished finalizing his draft stuff. So I would just ask for 1 additional car, just because every deputy puts 30,000 miles on it, on a vehicle a year. So we don't have 1 car for each person. So they're sharing cars. So you can get 60,000 miles in 1 year on a brand new car, hard miles. So it's a little different. So I just don't want to get behind, because I remember at one point in the past that we were kind of where we're going now in terms of not being able to buy cars and just making things work and hoping they didn't break down. Because we just had to replace a transmission three weeks ago in a vehicle. So, it just stuff happens. Anyway, that's all I had. And I'd be happy to answer questions if anyone has questions.
So Sheriff, you used to get extra funding for drug enforcement. Does that still happen or have they kind of restructured that?
They have restructured that and reduced I think they had 20 million one year. Now it's back down to 3 for the entire state, somewhere around there for the entire state. So that is not a funding stream that we have anymore.
And Sheriff, on the jail management system, it sounds like we have a system that just isn't real functional right now. And for, you know,
It does the
upfront,
bare minimum with us double checking items to make sure it's right.
and it sounds like for an investment of $38,000, we can have a modern system that works. There's going to be some implementation hiccups, but we'll have a system that works for 38,000.
Correct. As long as we have IT infrastructure also that can help. So there's not just the cost, but as long as there's the ability for the other IT folks to be able to make it work.
Well, are we going to need new hardware for this new system we'll work
It's all
on?
cloud-based. No, it's just, we have to run things through the right process to get to this. And that has not done that because I didn't want to waste time. So.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Yeah.
And did I hear that the yearly maintenance cost would be about 3,000 more for that system than what we're currently?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay. Just curious if you've talked with our IS folks about that system yet.
Not this specific system. They've been in the other ones where it just cost prohibitive too, so that's an easy no for them. Yes, sir.
So I'm going to use my same kind of question. I've asked some others about a 10-year trend line. So as you know, I'm always very concerned about the medical care responsibilities that you have in the jail. And it's sad that you have that. But now you're at $900,000 and you will likely go over that, right?
I mean, sure.
As you do go over.
Generally, I would say yes.
Every year.
Yes.
Do you have any sense of a 10-year trend line on medical expenses in that jail?
Oh, it's going up for sure.
Can you reduce it?
No, I mean,
Can you show me a graph of what it looks like?
sure. I mean, not right at this exact moment, but I
No,
can put one together. Yeah.
That's, I'm asking if you can produce one for this body, because I think to put it in the record would be great.
It would look like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I will add that we don't provide, just so everyone knows, we don't provide everything that you would like go to your primary care for. That's not what we do. We do things, the basic medical care. And then curveballs come. Yesterday, we had an intake for a Measure 11 type crime, and our medical staff said, "Oh, this person's really sick. Send him to the hospital first. Liver cancer." So, I mean, now what? That was yesterday, so I don't know what that looks like in terms of costs or anything like that. But it just, people are sicker now than they've been.
And it's likely that that patient is on outpatient care already, and you'll get him back.
One would think. Yeah, most times we find that those in custody don't have, they don't keep up on the outside, but when they come inside, basic medical care, if you have cancer, you just can't ignore them, you know, so there are things that, and we do try to get folks out if it's reasonable, if it's realistic with the court's blessing and all that, to be able to get somebody out of custody and relieve that cost, because as soon as we're out, we don't have to pay for that anymore.
Yeah.
So.
All I'm trying to do here is to make certain that we emphasize there's things you can do for controlling costs somewhat in patrol, controlling costs somewhat in the jail. But this is one of those things where whatever's dealt with you, as the example you just gave, you're going to deal with it. You're going to take care of it, and you're going to pay for it. We're all going to pay for it. And I don't think that we emphasize it enough to the public about this is why it costs so much money to run your local government. One of the reasons, and there's nothing, we're trying everything we can, right? You know, to get the state and federal government to recognize this is not what jails are supposed to be about, among other things. But we still get to deal with it. And that's just one part of it. And the behavioral health side is another thing that is a huge problem for you to deal with. If you just had to deal with putting them in there and turning the lock, and, you know, the patrol side, things might be much easier, but or affordable. So I just want to make certain that we continue to emphasize this is what it takes to run a sheriff's office. And there's more than just managing folks with a badge and a gun.
100%.
And then Sheriff, I wanted to make a comment. couple months ago, we met as a compensation committee, and I want to apologize for my failure. We should have given you a longevity bump, and we didn't do that. I wanted to apologize. That was my fault.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure.
Thank you.
It seems that everybody loses when federal insurance benefits drop as soon as you set foot in that institution. Taxpayers are paying more, medical outcomes are at risk, et cetera.
No other counties have a client who's, let's just say, on the fringes of society. She needs to do 30 days in a different county, but she's on methadone. They won't take her into jail until she can get her dosage of methadone to about a quarter of where she started. And so other counties are saying, hey, you've got these health problems, you can't come in custody. So Sheriff, yeah. Yes.
If it's measure 11.
We do continue type of Suboxone or any of those things. We don't necessarily start it while they're in jail, but we continue it because it is detrimental if you just are stop.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
And just to reiterate on the medical side, I balance, currently our medical staff is provided by our public health department, and I try to balance those two. We get currently a bill from them monthly of $60,000 to $65,000 just for the staff. There may be months that I don't reimburse public health for that, just to balance the cost. So even the cost that the sheriff is going to show you is not going to be the true cost to the county. It is probably exceeding $1 million right now. But I try to balance those things depending on the condition of the public health fund and those kind of things. So it is probably one of the costs that have exploded as much as possible on the jail side. You've always had food costs, and that's a cost associated with your population and that. But medical is out of hand. We've reduced our cost that we're reimbursing Salem Health and that by 20% before we were having to pay full load. The sheriff's been working on trying to get that reduced, and I finally told his office person that does all the payment vouchers and that, just discount it 20% because another county's getting that type of rate, and we're just taking it until we get formal approval from them. So it is something that's difficult to manage, and like Commissioner Pope said, it's something that we can't control. And when there are serious crimes like Measure 11 and that, you really don't get the get out of jail free card. You have to keep them in those kind of things. And there's been legislation trying to keep those costs covered while they're incarcerated, but it always falls on deaf ears. So
It's a public safety hazard. I mean, you're not making decisions to lodge based on somebody's pre-existing medical conditions, but that's a horrible position to even contemplate.
The Chair, I would like to make a motion that we keep the $38,000 for the upgrade of the jail's operations system and the extra vehicle on the wish list.
Thank you, Mr. Mordhurst. Is there a second for that? Second. Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Those in favor of adding the $38,000 for the jail maintenance, jail software system and an additional vehicle to the wish list, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. All right. Do we have, so we need a motion on the patrol and the jail budgets. Is there a motion for the patrol and the jail budgets?
So moved.
Thank you. Those in favor of tentatively approving the budgets for patrol and jail, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. All right, Mr. Hanson, I think we're on animal control.
Yes, animal control is its own separate dedicated fund. We primarily address dog control, but it ends up being more issues if there's undernourished animals that are brought to the attention of the sheriff. We have addressed a number of different types of animals that are being kept by the general public but primary emphasis is on dog control for this budget. We recently we didn't start. We purchased and are now housing our own dogs out at the fairgrounds. I think we have a kennel size 8, 12. We haven't ever been full. We have a lot of volunteer effort helping the sheriffs, both with food for the kennel and for having people out there to make sure that they're fed and have proper water and that. So he's seen a lot of the general public step up and help with costs associated with that. Prior to that, we were having to have our animals at the Humane Society, and that we were put on notice that they weren't going to take our animals anymore. So we had contract disputes and that. So we created our dog pound out at the fairgrounds, and so far it's working well. This requires a general fund transfer that tends to go up about 20,000 a year, so we're at 185,000 in operating transfer in. We've been pretty flat on our dog licensing. Whether it's time to look at increasing the costs associated with that, that usually fills up the room more than any budget hearing does, because people don't like to pay more for their dog licenses. And sometimes it's a self-defeating purpose. If it costs too much, they just don't license the dog and those things. But I would recommend tentative approval of $262,500 for this budget, both in expenses and revenues.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of tentatively approving revenues and expenses of animal control, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Next budget in your budget books tab is the Community Corrections Department. There are two programs within the general fund, both community corrections, traditional parole and probation, and then we have a community service element that we provide for community service hours that are issued by the courts. We utilize that resource to do parks maintenance, roadside cleanup, and those kind of things. Parole and probation is primarily funded and almost exclusively funded by state funding, 1145 funding. There's side monies through deflection and those kind of things that are boosting revenues in that department. 1145 was probably created in 97 or 98. Before that, the county had their community corrections with the state of Oregon. Through that bill, all community corrections services went back to the individual counties. And with the caveat that if they don't meet a certain threshold of funding, the counties could opt out. Over the history of that bill, 2 counties have opted out. Lynn County and Douglas County are the 2 counties that are operated by the state, parole and probation. And then the other 34 counties are operated by their own county. Some community corrections departments fall within the sheriff's operations, some do not. Ours is a standalone department. Jody's back. Jody Merritt's our community corrections director and juvenile director. She's back in the audience. 1145 funding is always controversial at the state level. Every biennium, they fight over how much that money should be or not be. The corrections side asks for more money, the legislative side or the governor asks for less money. They try to balance it, but however, the trend recently has been to not fund it adequately or hesitate to fund it adequately. They are doing it through different grant processes and those kind of things. But funding for 1145 has been on the decline. And it's a formula that the state produces. Our share of the pie is whatever the previous 2 years of utilization of clientele that we have. Our slice of the pie usually falls between 1.45% and 1.8%. We've been in the 1.5% regularly. So of all the money that is given to 1145, our allotment is 1.5, let's say, of that pie. And there's always a threshold that they can't drop under. I believe when Lynn and Douglas opted out, the state ended up paying 30 to 50% more than what they were offering them to run the business. So it is a threat and a threshold. They're trying to get that removed from legislation and that through different bills. But 1145 is the primary funding source, and you can see it here. Sometimes it's adequate money for the county to operate it. Sometimes it's county supported with the utilization of deflection money, which may or may not go away a year from now. We're able to have adequate funding this time around. My guess is during the long session in 27, community corrections funding will be in jeopardy and require more support from the county in total if you want to maintain the service that we provide, which is both overseeing felony caseload and misdemeanor caseload. Most counties do not even address misdemeanors for probation. And if you want to, you can see that there's even a reduction of 1 FT in this budget, just knowing that we're not going to be able to fund in the future that position. We chose not to backfill that. The other budget within the general fund is the Community Service Diversion Program. They receive some of their funding internally. They receive some of their monies through the operating levy that we currently have in place. And we sometimes get federal awards and monies from ODOT to clean up roadside efforts and those kind of things. So those are all the funding efforts for community service. We utilize over thousands of hours of community service time. So it's court-appointed volunteers, as I like to refer to them. We also get funding through buyouts when people from other counties commit a crime and get it put on probation and receive community service hours. We allow them to buy out because getting them to show up is very difficult. They're more than happy to write the check to get out of that effort, but it helps fund this program for those that we utilize it for. So those are the two components of community corrections. Like I said, want to speak?
Not unless there's questions. You can have them.
Okay, so there you go for those two budget. I would recommend tentative approval on both programs. And if you have any questions of Jody, don't hesitate to ask.
Other questions from the committee for Ms. Merritt? Do your community corrections officers, they don't carry firearms, is that correct?
We're currently in negotiations with them, and that is one topic that is on the table.
I'm making no comment either way. I'm just seeking information.
That information, we are now the only county in the state that does not arm our parole and probation. Washington County used to be the other one, and they are now in the process of providing that.
Yeah, like I said, no comment either direction, just seeking information. Other questions from the committee? Is there a motion to tentatively approve the budgets for corrections and community service?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Morgenhurst. Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Those in favor of tentatively approving the budgets for corrections and community service, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next program on the agenda is the juvenile fund. Ms. Merritt is also the overseer of this fund. This is the county's biggest general fund transfer fund that we have. As I mentioned in the budget message, the county is proposing on transferring $1 million to this program to provide juvenile services. I also mentioned that funding for juvenile has remained flat essentially for the last 6-7 years. So any increases in costs associated with people, any increases in costs associated with juvenile detention beds are basically borne by the county. Juvenile detention beds are becoming more of a premium. And unfortunately, our use of juvenile detention beds has been stressed recently as more youth tend to be committing more serious crimes that require them staying in detention rather than being able to be put more on a probation type role. This is a program we're required to provide. We do not have our own juvenile detention facility. The cost of operating a juvenile detention facility of our own is way beyond cost prohibitive. We would have to build our own facility. It would have to house a minimum of probably 8 juvenile detention beds. Whether we could rent those beds out or not, don't know. You would probably have to have a staff of probably 16 people. You probably have to have 2 24/7 people in that facility. Costs associated with food, the things you have to provide juvenile are much greater. You have to provide education. You have to provide things that you don't have to provide at the adult level. So all those costs associated is very expensive. To rent a jail bed is usually about $100. What are we up to now with juvenile detention?
Well, we get a discounted rate because our contract, but I believe it's around 200 to 250.
A day. So,
Bed. We have 4 beds, is that right?
We contract for 4 beds,
and then we have access to an overflow bed.
which is what Greg was referring to. We had up to 7 2 weeks ago.
They aren't cheap. When I first started here, we were in the pretty low. Even until recently, we were in the 140, 150 range. And then it's just, the price of that is, we don't control it and we're at their mercy. we used to have beds both in Marion County and Yamhill County. Now we are only have beds in Yamhill County. So,
Mr. Hanson, you're hearing this, I'm sure, from your counterparts in other counties, whether they're hosting those facilities or contracting them out. This is a statewide unfunded need,
yep.
put it lightly, yeah.
So, yeah, the housing of youth is not a cheap endeavor. And like I said, you gotta, when the judge orders them to detention, that's where they go. And we try to manage that as best as possible and get them through the system as quickly as possible. But we don't control that, just like the jail doesn't control medical issues. So I would recommend tentative approval for the juvenile fund, both in revenues and expenses for their two programs.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman and Mr. Lawson. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Oh, do we even have to talk about this department? Next on yours is emergency management. Emergency management covers technically more than emergency management. Our emergency communications system falls within this program budget. Our emergency management program is funded partially by federal awards, which have been difficult to receive from the feds, mainly because of reorganizations they want at the emergency management level and partly with their opinion of the state of Oregon and what they do. And then we have charges for service rentals within this budget. We charge outside agencies and internal agencies for the use of our emergency communication system. We used about $1.8 million of ARPA money to upgrade our system, which we did a couple of years ago. It was in need. We're now charging departments twofold. We're charging for basically usage and operations of that system. We are also tacking on, and we're doing it for the first year this year, an additional $150,000 to put in reserve for future upgrades. We funded everything for all agencies with our ARPA money. So we provide emergency communications for all fire departments and all law enforcement in Polk County, along with certain communication channels for public works, building inspection, and those kind of things. So it is a countywide emergency communication system and just a daily operational system that we provide. And we've upgraded our system a lot over the last decade. We do get grant funding for that. We do get grant funding sometimes for radio improvements and that, going to digital versus analog and those kind of things. But we're starting to build a reserve. So when this has to be upgraded or replaced, there's going to be adequate reserves that's just not paid by Polk County, but by all those entities that share in utilization of that system. So they just recently got their bills. So that I may get emails coming my way in a little while, but we had a meeting to discuss that and they all voted that we should do it incrementally rather than sending them a bill 10 years from now when it's a major upgrade or that. So this is a program within the general fund. It is subsidized by the general fund monies. Knock on wood, we don't really have to utilize our emergency management and declared emergencies for this upcoming year. We had a very good flood season this year, not too much activity in that. Hopefully this dry summer won't produce anything we can't handle, but you never know. So but I would recommend tentatively approving the emergency management budget.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Those in favor of tentatively approving the emergency management budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion.
Quick question.
Yes,
Sorry,
Commissioner Gordon.
it's approved, but I'm sorry if I missed it. Did that AMPG grant from FEMA get reinstated?
Yes,
It did. Good.
but we haven't seen any money yet either. So
Okay.
a yes is sometimes, I don't know for sure, but
Budget what you know.
in theory, it has been
Yeah. Okay.
reauthorized.
We'll track that.
Thank you.
Next budget within the general fund is the parks budget. We haven't really done any major expansions in our parks program since the improvements that were made at Buena Vista. And that was funded primarily, if you look historically, there was a big expenditure in 23-24 for improvements out at the Buena Vista Park that we have, mostly in the boat landing area and expansion in that. And that went fine. We're back to our bare bones park maintenance and that. We utilize community service to do a lot of that. So this is a budget that we receive RV fees for, parks and that through the state. We receive, like I said, about $80,000 a year, and that primarily funds our parks program. We don't have overnight camping or provide anything super special in our parks. So I would recommend tentative approval of expenses in the parks program.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor, please say aye. The parks budget is tentatively approved as proposed.
The next section has some non-departmental programs in there. The first one being Title III, monies that we utilize for a forest deputy. I think the sheriff's gone now, but we contract with private forest companies. And that forest deputy does two parts. They're assigned part-time to Falls City to give them a law enforcement presence. And I think that's working really, really well. And we also utilize this money for part of that position. And we also contract with private timber agencies to patrol the woods and that. And that's a special position within the sheriff's office. And that deputy is doing a great job. I'm assuming that he will continue to be in that position. It takes a little while to learn the ins and outs of the forest side. It takes a little time to get Falls City to trust and utilize a person. It takes a while. So there's been good efforts on both of those with this deputy, and he's doing a fine job. And that's its own program budget within our general fund. So I would recommend tentative approval for that program for the Title III.
Are there any comments or any motions?
Also move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mordhurst. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wasson. Those in favor of tentatively approving the Title III budget as proposed, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Then the next section on the sheet is only the little upper section of that sheet for non-departmental, which has some this miscellaneous stuff in there for miscellaneous department expenses, some community mediation dollars in the participation for public agencies. We have boards and commissions expenses. And then we have special projects. That is a new number in there of $25,000. We had a presentation, so I'll back up. Currently, the county receives opioid settlement money in two different programs. We get some in behavioral health specific, and then we get some for the general fund. We receive from all these different opioid settlements, and we get a new notification that they've settled with three more people that were in this class action suit. We are currently receiving about $150,000 a year. We use a lot of that on prevention and education in the FCO type work in our reporting. We also had a presentation by, what was their official name? Fentanyl.
Fentanyl Free Oregon, right? I think that's,
I didn't realize there was going to be a quiz.
I think it's Fentanyl Free Oregon.
We had a presentation and they were seeking to address opioid issues in education and those kind of things.
Regional nonprofit.
Yeah. And the board committed $25,000 this year to them and $25,000 next year to them. Obviously, they have to report back to the board and make sure they're doing what we hope they're doing. But that's utilizing some of those monies outside the county umbrella to provide that education and those kind of things. So that's why you see that $25,000 in there going up from $500. But it's also a new revenue source that we have as these opioid settlements. Some of those settlements are as long as 10 to 15 years. Some are short, and they're all different. And we get percentages based on some formula that they created. Money usually flows to the state and then gets distributed down to those entities that signed up for the class action suit, which we did.
Their motion to tentatively approve the non-departmental budget. Mr. Hartman, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of tentatively approving the non-departmental budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. The next tab in your budget book is community development. There are two programs within the general fund, planning and environmental health. And then the next three programs, building inspection is its own dedicated fund. Austin and I oversee both the economic development fund, and then we have a household hazardous waste fund. I'll go through the two general fund programs first. Planning is a mandated program that we provide. It obviously does all the short range and long range planning for the county. Deals with land use applications and those kind of things. Obviously, we end up having some of those decisions go before a board. We have some of those decisions go before a hearings officer. But we have staff in this department that is approximately the same as it was last year. Austin is very good at moving his people around to address needs where they need to be. Part of the funding for this occurs through the economic development program, charges for services, and then we also have fees in that is associated with applications that the planning department addresses. And that's the intergovernmental is what we get from the economic development, and the charges for services is what we get through fees for applications for land use determinations and that. So that is planning. Like I said, it is pretty much, again, a status quo budget, but status quo means there weren't many change programmatically to it, but the costs continue to go up. The other budget within the general fund is environmental health. This, in other counties, this program sometimes shows up under public health. Sometimes it shows up as its own fund, those kind of things, but currently it is still within the general fund. This department essentially pays for itself through fees and franchise taxes and those kind of things. You have, septic permits, you have restaurant license, those kind of things. For a time being, the county was paying for those restaurant licenses when we had ARPA money and COVID money, because they took some hits during those periods of time. But we currently are not doing that anymore. FTE wise, again, it's a 0.1, but he has the same amount of people. It's just reshuffling the deck that he has up there to address needs within the departments. So those are the two programs within the general fund that I would recommend tentative approval on. We can bring Austin down, or we don't have to.
Move tentative approval of both.
Thank you, Commissioner Gordon.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wasson. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The planning and environmental health budgets are tentatively approved as proposed. The next fund is the building inspection fund. This used to be within the general fund. We moved it to its own fund about 3 years ago, maybe 4. This fund was very healthy. Since building has slowed down, it is becoming more difficult to fund this position. It's also very difficult to find employees to hire into building inspection. They are in high demand and very difficult to hire. The state will backfill and help us out for a fee, and we end up contracting with them to do some of our building inspections because of licensing that we don't have inside our department and that. But we've been lowering our beginning fund balance. You can see that the beginning fund balance is going to be about 100,000 this year. I think its high was over 300,000. So when times are good and building it pays for itself and then some. And when times aren't as good, somewhat like recording fees, when people are buying houses or refinancing or doing those things, our revenues are good in those two programs. Our interest rate is bad usually because that means interest rates have fallen. So it kind of balances itself out, but this one's getting more difficult to provide. Hopefully there are increases in our building permits, but I think last month he told me we had 6, and that's much lower than normal. So it's not a boom in the housing market at this moment in time. Revenues and expenses for this fund. Is there a motion to tentatively approve revenues and expenses of the building inspection fund? Thank you, Mr. Lawson and Commissioner Poe. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Economic Development Fund. This fund is primarily funded by beginning fund balance. The federal awards is the mystery 700,000 for a community development block grant that we usually don't, but is a placeholder there. You can see historically it's 0. And then we get state shared revenue from lottery money. And that money is budgeted at $450,000. We have a number of programs that we fund out of this Economic Development Fund. We have, as you can see, the Water Master is funded out of this program. We have the Trapper funded out of this program. We have the research center that we fund out of this program. We fund long-range planning out of this program. We're currently in the process of funding a regional water project out of this fund. We recently also funded broadband, $200,000 to do an area near the West Salem, just outside the West Salem area, to secure broadband for rural residents. We just completed that. The board had a overview of our broadband success that has occurred countywide over the past 5 years, 4 or 5 years. We originally started it with COVID money, and then we expanded it with ARPA money, and then recently expanded it with a $200,000 investment in economic development. It's been a great success. We've addressed a very large majority of our rural broadband users that didn't have access and now have either improved access or first-time access. And I would say that we've done better than anyone else in the state. And we saw the need during COVID when, no school was in place and kids are supposed to do online, but they don't have capabilities. They have to go down to the library if it was open or whatever, or find a place that had Wi-Fi or whatever, just to try to do their things. So efforts of the county board and Dean Anderson and Craig Pope was the leader on that effort, has been a great success for our broadband efforts. And like I said, we're way ahead of all the other 36 counties in this effort. And we've probably gone as far as we can go as a county government in providing that expansion. Now it's going to be up to the state and the feds to do the rest, because some of those are very difficult little sites to provide that access to. But economic development provides for our bigger picture plans, and also, we have pretty good a revenue source in lottery money. So unless they change that funding, this fund will do a pretty good job at addressing needs in the future. There are motion to tentatively approve the Economic Development Fund budget as proposed.
Also move.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The last one under the community development umbrella is household hazardous waste. This fund was created, over 20 years ago. It allows for, on your garbage bill, you'll never realize it, but there's a 25-cent charge that you have on your
garbage bill that funds this program. It used to be pretty robust when we started, and it is dwindled over time. We're beginning to build back beginning fund balance, but our activity in this fund is pretty slight. We're going to have an increase from Marion County for having our people take household hazardous waste over to a site that they have available. The board may have to consider looking at increasing that 25-cent fee to 50 cents, but we haven't done it yet and we're managing it still. But if you ever want to be robust in these efforts, you're probably going to have to raise that rate. It hasn't, since its inception, it has maintained the 25-cent fee, and it seems to be working right now. So again, this is a dedicated fund for the purpose of these services. I would recommend both revenues and expenses for this fund.
Their motion? Thank you, Commissioner Gordon. Is there a second? Thank you, Hartman. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
You are now ahead of schedule.
That's where I like to be.
We're 20 minutes ahead. You have choices. I don't think lunch has arrived yet. So we can begin doing miscellaneous funds if you'd like to do that.
My philosophy is might as well work unless there's food.
Well,
Any other comments?
Agreed.
I think Buddha said that.
Well, let's forge forward then with the miscellaneous funds.
all right. If you want to take on miscellaneous funds, the first fund we will address is domestic mediation. I believe you, Chairman, noted that we don't have a transfer to domestic mediation anymore. If we look at historically, the last year in the history column, we were getting about $50,000 for domestic mediation. The state upped that to over 125,000, and it's remaining there. As a result, it's beginning to build a beginning fund balance. I don't know how long they'll maintain that amount, or if the courts are going to want to use it for expanded mediation services. I don't know. They kind of, like I said, this is kind of a pass through for us. The judges wanted to control it. We didn't want to control it. We've tried to get Department of Justice to just direct the funding to the court, Polk County court budget, but they say, nope, it has to go to the county. So, like I said, presiding judge and I have talked many times, but it will continue to be a pass through. It will never, I shouldn't say the word never, but it will not require a general fund transfer in the next decade, at least, if ever. So I'd recommend tentative approval of both revenues and expenses for this fund.
Is there a motion to tentatively approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Court Security Fund. This used to be a robust fund. The courts provided a lot through fees, and that provided a lot more revenue than it did when it first began back in 2002 and 2003. Over time, those monies got absorbed through different places, Department of Justice and those kind of things. We do not receive very much in state operating grants. The judges are very concerned on court security, and rightly so. We've done a lot of major improvements to it, but it's still not at the level they would like to see. And we try to manage that through a court security type committee, and that The courts were able to secure a big-time grant to address a metal detector. They're going to want to install that out here at the main entrance of this facility. So pretty soon in the future, you will have to go through the process. All that funding and staffing was secured through this grant. We're a pilot project according to the courts on this one. And hopefully it continues to be funded in the future through the courts because the county doesn't have the ability to fund it. They know that. It was reiterated multiple times. We'll see. I believe that project is scheduled to occur June 1, maybe?
The goal is to be up and running June 1st.
No. So there will be a change. Will the public like the change? Probably not.
Just yesterday, I was having a discussion. I went to the Clackamas County Courthouse yesterday for work. And I was having a discussion with the judge and the other attorney, and they asked about our security down here. And they laughed at my description of our lack of magnetometer. They asked if we had deputies in the courthouse. I said, well, it's in the building next door to the courthouse. Anyway, this is the only courthouse that I regularly practice in where the public does not have to pass through a magnetometer to enter the building.
Well, that will end effectively June 1st. And yes, I get an earful now and then, but we have done things over the years. Obviously, we had a lot of entrances that were open to the public. We've reduced those. We've made incremental efforts, but never the full leap, partly because we don't have the funding to do the full desire of the courts and that we do have deputies that circulate through the courthouses. We do have on high profile trials at the judge's request, they're in the courtrooms and that, but on a regular basis, not necessarily.
I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I'm glad that we will have a metal detector that the public will need to pass through to get in. And I know that that's not going to be popular, but gives me a lot of comfort.
I'm sure it will not be a popular thing that they will have to go through, but that's the court security fund. It doesn't provide enough revenue to really address anything anymore. There are efforts at the state level to upgrade courthouses and that, but that at best is at a 50% participation by the state. We've looked at a criminal justice center maybe across the street at the old McMullen property. That's not a realistic option anymore with the cost of construction and that. Most counties that are going through that effort are projecting $2,000 a square foot. So a 50,000 square foot facility would be over $100 million. Polk County's not ready for that. Polk County taxpayers are not ready for that kind of bonding effort and that. And the need just isn't there, even though you could have a fully secure type of facility then. But those counties that are trying to go that route are struggling with that. Washington County, I think, needs to build 2 or 3 new courthouses, courtrooms, just for their courts. They can't afford it. And they can afford a lot up there. So it's just very expensive these days.
Yeah, the Washington County courthouse is similar to what we have here, where it's several buildings kind of stuck together and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
They had more incidents.
The last fatality in Washington County was, I think it was nearly 20 years ago. They have their current courthouse has two entrances, two public entrances. Both are fully staffed, full-time. Both have magnetometers, x-ray machines, very different than what we have even across the street. But the last incident out there was about where there was a fatality was 20 years ago.
Those counties that did take advantage of the new court found out the operating requirements is over around 500,000 a year. So $500,000 is now they're required to provide that security and stuff. And they're just really stretching some of the budgets.
Yeah. We don't have that here. Is there a motion regarding the court security fund?
Move to TA.
Thank you, Commissioner Pope. Right,
I'll second.
thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next fund is the Law Library Fund. By law, we're required to provide a law library. Our law library also funds the law library that we have in the jail for jail inmates to access, and that, which we're required to have rather than turning them over to the basement of the courthouse. This requires a general fund transfer, normally anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000, just depending on. Most of everything is online now. In the old days, we'd be getting cases of books and having to bring those books out, put them on the shelf, those kind of things. Everything is mainly an online service and those kind of things. And I would recommend tentative approval of both revenues and expenses for the law library.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of tentatively approving revenues and expenses of the law library budget, please say aye. Aye. The motion passes.
So the next fund is the county school fund. It's almost always a wild guess what we're going to get to utility franchise taxes. They have two choices on how they pay that tax, depending on which one's the cheapest for them. This is a purely pass-through fund. We get the money in and then we send it back out. We try to just make this fund big enough so we don't have to do a supplemental budget on it. We've had to do it once. So we overestimate, hopefully, the amount of money we're going to get through this franchise tax, so we can bring it in and push it back out. And if you want more explanation on it, Caitlin would be happy to talk about it.
Caitlin, could you give maybe a 30-second primer on this franchise tax?
Yes, so there's fees that are collected from an electric co-op, and there's a percentage schedule that goes to the taxing districts, which is this county school fund. So the 33.3% of however they've elected to pay the franchise fee goes to the county school fund. And then the next month after the county's received it, it goes straight to all the taxing districts. So it's literally in and out.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And it gets distributed by formula.
Yeah, so that gets distributed by the formula and the distribution schedule of all of the taxing districts. Right.
Other questions or comments? Is there a motion regarding the county school fund?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
So technically on the American Rescue Fund and the Coordinated Housing Fund and PERS Reserve Fund, we'll just do the two. The ARPA Fund and the Coordinated Housing Fund, you don't have to tentatively approve because those budgets will be at zero by the end of this fiscal year. Not proposing on anything. We will not be receiving any additional monies in ARPA or in coordinated housing unless we get a grant, at which time then we would reinstitute this type of fund. So you don't need to tentatively approve those. We do have to show them for historical purposes within the budget. So no motion required for those two funds. PERS Reserve Fund, I mentioned in my budget message, that was a fund where we were charging additional monies to the departments to build up a PERS Reserve Fund. We did that for the first 2 years. This is actually would have been the fourth year for that fund. In the third year, we reduced the amount of that surcharge to cover basically the expenses of the PERS increase for the departments. Out of necessity for the general fund, we needed to boost revenues, so we allocated those monies back from this fund to pay for or not to pay for, but to boost revenues for the general fund, public works fund, health services fund, and the behavioral health. So that essentially is required because there's transfers involved, and we will be basically zeroing out that program. Need tentative approval both in expenses and revenues.
Is there a motion to tentatively approve revenues and expenses of the PERS Reserve Fund?
So moved.
Okay. Thank you.
Discussion.
Yep. Yes.
So what was the reason why we created this account?
To cover future PERS
Right.
increases.
What changed?
Well, two things changed. Actually, we didn't use any of the money we collected in the first 2 years for it. We just reduced the amount of money that we charged internally for the departments. So it went from 3% to 1%. When we were putting the budget together this year, we were going to charge 2% to add more money to this fund. Eventually, we were going to have to, depending on the size of the PERS increase, we're going to have to transfer that money back out to the departments or not charged for the PERS reserve. If it was more than 3%, we were going to have to refund money to the departments to make up for it. Reducing it from the 3% down to the 1% last year, or the current year we're in, covered the 2% increase in PERS. So we didn't have to access the fund. Next year, this year, we realized after charging the 2%, we just didn't have enough money in the general fund. So I made the decision, and again, you can change that. But if we do, we would reduce the revenues in the general fund by $1 million, or $1,065,000 is actually coming out of this fund. And you'd be living with a contingency that was barely over $1 million for a $33 million fund. So I made the decision to zero it out. And that's why I said I used every trick I had to maintain the general fund without having to do some layoffs. So, yeah. It's at the discretion of the budget committee to determine if you want to go that route or not. That was the decision I made as the budget officer. Did I like it? No. Did I wish I had to? No.
No, but I just want to make certain that everybody understands it deserves discussion because it was a policy decision by
Correct.
this board. And the problem hasn't gone away. In fact, the liability continues to grow. And I want to emphasize that now we're going to strip down an account that we created, rightfully so, to help protect us in a liability concern about the unfunded actuarial. And so now we're left with nothing in that particular case. And we're
Right.
doing that to save positions.
Yeah. And you probably would have started to tap that, not this year. I mean, we did because of my decision, but in 27, 28, when you get the new PERS rate, you probably would have begun to tap that or zero that surcharge out and just left that money there as a reserve. But my guess is in 27, 28, you're going to have a PERS increase of about 3.5% is my guess. We never find that out until December of 26. So we will know ahead of time when we put the budget together for 27, 28, what our employer rate is going to be. But yes, we've stripped all our reserves from PERS
Yeah.
and put it back in. And
So this is bungee jumping without a safety line. And that's what I equate this to. And at some point, the rubber band will break. So I'm going to vote no.
that's fine.
And I want to make sure that you understand that while you're asking for votes, because you're not asking for nay votes yet, that you're going to on this one.
That's fine.
Because somebody's got to object.
And
We
believe
did
me,
this for a reason. And I appreciate your work and your decision-making, but I need people to understand how dramatic this scenario really is.
Yep. And believe me, I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But
I get it.
I felt out of necessity not to burn the bridge yet. But it's going to crumble, like I said, next year without the levy.
Question, assuming levy passes, levies, we can still keep this fund active and rebuild it in the future, correct? In advance of the next calculation.
Correct. You probably wouldn't do it in 27, 28, which would be the first year of the levy.
Yeah.
But you could probably bring it in 27. Because you're going to have the PERS increase, and tacking on a surcharge on top of that would be pretty hefty. But you won't see that increase the following year in 28, 29. I would then begin it if capable of doing it. Obviously, part of it depends on the amount of the levy that the board chooses to go out with and those kind of things. I mean, this next levy, I still would recommend going out, and we're just talking public safety levy now, still going out for a public safety levy. But the next time you go out for a levy after that, assuming that it passes, gonna have to probably be a general operations plus public safety levy. Because the other things in the general fund outside of public safety cannot support itself. So you're gonna have it. I don't like saying all this stuff, but it's reality. You're going to have to look at, because you can't trim the clerk's office. You can't trim the assessor's office. You can't, we're at minimum staffing in almost every department. You're going to have to find other revenue sources. And if something occurs in the future for future revenues, you may not have to do it, but any change in what we currently have, the operating levy is the only option you have.
Mr. Hanson, when would you project out into the future going out for an operating levy?
Well, we have the public safety levy schedule. Obviously, the board hasn't approved it yet, but that has always been, we go out for a 5-year levy, reauthorize in 4. May of 27 is the reauthorization, would be the reauthorization of that public safety levy. It will be higher than 49.5 cents. It will be higher than 59.5 cents unless the board chooses to keep it lower. I will probably be making recommendations on that levy. I've already done estimates and all those kind of things. Those are still somewhat guesses because you have to assume 2 things. You have to assume assessed value growth. Is it 3.5%? Is it 4%? Is it 4.5%? Statistically, right now, we're at 3.5. I don't know how to project it higher than that until things change economically. And then you have to pick what is the cost of growth in the cost of doing business in those public safety departments. Is it going to be, it's not 4%, I guarantee. Is it going to be 8%? Is it going to be 10%? I always thought 8% was plenty high. 10% is becoming the new norm now, just with the cost of insurance, PERS, wages, and the M&S of IT and those kind of charges. So it's all, I mean, and I'll give the board plenty of options and they'll say, they'll have to pick a number and that's the number we have to live with. So we didn't anticipate when we set it at 49.5 cents. During that time, it was 2023. We had a lot of openings that we weren't filling. We were building general fund reserves. There was no need to have that number be above 49.5 cents. 2 years later, in 25, we have full staffing at the sheriff's office, full staffing at the DA's office. We weren't receiving any savings there. We had flat growth in our property taxes, and expenses climbed and our property tax revenue didn't. It's an educated guess and you have to just pick on those numbers. But I understand the no vote that Commissioner Pope, I knew it was going to be controversial. I made the decision. That's why I get to be the budget officer. You guys get to be the budget committee and they get to be the board. I mean, they could, even if the budget committee passed it 4-2, if 2 of those no votes were the commissioners, they could be reversed for adoption. So it's not personal, it's business. I made a business decision. Greg's going to make a business decision. And is he wrong? No.
What would be,
Was I wrong? No. I mean,
let's say this transfer doesn't happen. Would those FTE cuts come from patrol?
I would recommend there's nowhere else to cut now. You either get to pick DA or you get to pick patrol. You can probably reduce the jail, maybe 1 or 2 positions max, but they're guaranteed a minimum staffing level to operate a jail. So you'd have to cut at the patrol level or at the DA level. A cop's, layoffs are going to be your cheapest people because it's based on seniority and that. Obviously, you could also cut some administration in that, but you're probably going to have to lay off 4 or 5 individuals minimum to maintain a contingency that I'm still scared of right now. So I'm not painting a pretty picture, but it's reality.
If I remember right, we paid a costly lesson when we laid off a bunch of deputies after having trained them, invested in them.
When you lay off a deputy that is already certified and already road ready, you are probably losing a $500,000 investment per person. Budgetarily, you're only losing, $150,000 to $180,000 because, a cop just isn't a person. There's cars, ammo, guns. There's a whole bunch of things that get attached to that person. So that's what I try to calculate. That's what a cost of a true body is. So, but no, this was a hard decision. Believe me, we put the budget together with the 2% surcharge, increasing it even by 1%. And I worked with Caitlin, trying to bring her up to speed on the budget that she's gonna, do next year. She won't talk about it, but she helped a lot this year, but we had 2% in there and we just had to do it. That was the decision I made. Didn't like making it, but I did.
Further discussion?
I'll just make one more comment. I think we're all facing alternatives that are less than ideal. There isn't a single one. And I agree with the purpose of this fund. I was hoping to dip into it when we needed to not go over that threshold, not zero it out. But I do think that this is the most prudent, immediate decision at this point, and we're going to have to reconsider. This board will have to, and this body will have to reconsider future levy amounts that cover the costs of providing the very basic services that the public expects. And that's just, it's the only alternative we have, really. So I think this will have to be shored up in a renewal campaign and effort. That's our only choice at this point, unless we find other revenues and are more successful than we have been in preventing unfunded mandates and the like. So I'm looking at the juvenile transfer especially.
Any further discussion? Is there a motion?
You have a motion and a second.
Oh, okay. Then let's let's vote on the PERS fund. Those in favor of tentatively approving the PERS fund budget, please say aye.
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 And those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Hey,
We have a tie. We have to look at the rules and see what the rules say when we have a tie, unless somebody knows right off the top of their head.
It's rare that you have a tie. Ties usually mean it does not pass.
The motion does not pass. All right, we have two more budgets in the miscellaneous fund. Do we want to do those before lunch? Any input?
Move to recess.
All right, let's recess then. We will reconvene at 10 minutes after 1.
It's not 35.
Tina's on it.
Okay.
Yeah, we are recording.
Mr. Hanson, the committee, let's come to order. Mr. Hanson, I believe we left off at the insurance fund.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this is the county insurance fund. Just like everything else, insurance costs continue to rise. Charges to departments continue to rise. Liability claims against the county continue to rise. So all of those factors come into play. This is a status quo budget. You can note that beginning fund balance is 0. Charges for services is a little shy, or is $1,150,000, and then transfer from the general fund is $200,000 to help backfill our negative fund balance in this insurance fund. The FTE in this are, I think, 0.1 of Morgan and 5% of myself. We pay for all county insurances. We have a fixed rate now for workers' comp, so we don't have retro payments in there. We also buy property insurance, liability insurance. Included in property is earthquake. Included in our liability insurance is cybersecurity policy. We also show retirees who are purchasing COBRA, which is county insurance continuation. We pay for that and then they reimburse us per whatever plan they're on. So overall, pretty much a status quo budget. Hoping insurance rates don't go up that much. Most insurance rates are a function of what is happening globally, but we're with CIS and it's pretty much local events that they have to address or deal with. So hopefully, like I said, we haven't got insurance quotes yet. We won't get those until probably the end of May or sometime in May. But I would recommend revenues and expenses in the amount of $1,350,000.
Any discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll move approval of the DA.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wasson. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Next fund is the Marine Patrol Fund. We no longer provide that service. The monies that we were receiving from the state were inadequate to provide that service. As a result, the sheriff returned that back to the state. I believe Marion County has picked up Willamette River coverage during the summer for that. There isn't any real appropriations in this with the exception of a transfer back to the general fund of $2,000. There was money left over in this fund and this is just a housekeeping to clean that fund and zero that fund out so we can, and when we zero a fund out, those monies return back to the general fund. So I would recommend tentative approval in there really aren't any revenues. It's existing beginning fund balance and
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Thank you, Mr. Mournhurst. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries.
the next fund is the Fair Fund. Fair Fund consists of two programs, the annual fair and the year-round fair. And in this case, the year-round fair budget is only an operation for 6 months. As you're aware, in 2025, we planned or we put forth an operating levy of 15 cents. That failed at the polls, approximately 60% no, 40% yes. We've had discussions about the future of the fair and that the board will be considering putting a levy on for this upcoming November. What the amount of the levy is yet to be determined. You're probably going to be somewhere in the range of 10 to 12 cents and most likely nearer the higher amount there. But that is, like I said, yet to be determined. That determination will probably take place sometime near the end of June or early July to determine what the levy amount will be and whether it's placed on the November ballot. So I'll give you scenarios. If the levy were to pass, then we would probably end up having to do a supplemental budget to continue operations of the fair through the remainder of this fiscal year. Right now, it's only a 6-month operation. Obviously, if it fails, the board, we would consider closing, or actually we would close down the fair and figure out all the things that we have to do as a result of that. But the fate of the fair will be determined basically in November. And like I said, the amount hasn't yet to be determined. The duration will be 5 years. I can guarantee that on the length of the levy period. But there are 2 programs. They did receive an increase in state funding this year from the normal, I think, 54,000 they normally get. And then they got approximately 78 or 79,000 for this upcoming year. Legislature approved in the short session to give the full 1% of lottery funds that the fairs were supposed to be getting. But that will not take effect until July of 2027. They've had approvals at times before and then had them taken away. So I'm not counting on that money. And the only way you would get that money is if you were operating a fair. So if they do get that full 1%, their 78, 79,000 that they currently are receiving could increase all the way up to $225,000. But those are yet to be determined and will be determined in the 27-28 budget if there's a successful vote in November for the fair levy. With that, I would recommend tentative approval of both the annual fair budget, which is the full fair budget, and then a operation of a half year with the annual fair.
Any discussion?
A question, Chair. So in the event of either scenario, should the board put out a levy and it's successful, will we need to reconvene this body? And then also, if the board puts out a levy and it isn't successful, those costs associated with closure of the property, would that likely also require a reconvening?
We will probably, depending on how much money is spent during this budget, we will still probably have to either, one, do a supplemental upon closure, but we may be able, it may fall within the 10% level that I can do a budget resolution on the closure part. Definitely we'll have to do one if it passes for the remaining 6 months of operation. So maybe on the closure, definitely on the approval for a supplemental budget.
Further questions or discussion? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries.
The next program budget and the final program budget for the day is Management Services Fund. This is an internal service fund. It contains quite a bit of program budgets. Within the Management Services Fund is the non-departmental that basically acts as a contingency and the transfer to the Building Improvement Fund. Then there's the Board of Commissioners, Central Services, a bunch of building maintenance budgets, Academy building maintenance, jail building maintenance, Buchanan building maintenance, Resource Center. It's basically building maintenance, the Academy Annex building maintenance, and then the courthouse building maintenance. And then also within that fund is Information Services, GIS, Finance, Human Resources, and County Council. On the first page in your budget book is the revenues associated with this budget. It is a $10,767,500 budget. I'll go through the first one, non-departmental. Basically, it says special projects, but that acts as a contingency for the fund. And then to use those special projects, we still go through a budget resolution to move monies to the other programs. So it acts like a contingency. The other portion within the non-departmental is $700,000 that is transferred to the Building Improvement Fund, which we will talk about tomorrow. It deals with major building improvements, both at the courthouse complex and at the jail and at the academy building. So those three buildings are what the Building Improvement Fund deals with. The next budget is the Board of Commissioners budget in your book. This is the operating budget for the Board of Commissioners. Board of Commissioners was the last program type department other than building maintenance to be added to management services. We did that about 8 to 10 years ago. Obviously it funds the three commissioners and their salaries along with half-time of Nicole's FTE. The other things within the Board of Commissioners is materials and services. You'll see workshops and conferences, and that's mainly the one that's guaranteed that we deal with is the AOC annual conference. And then beyond that, there can be a multitude of things. We're going to have a new commissioner for sure in Commissioner Pope's position 2. There's a good chance that that commissioner will attend county college or new commissioner orientation at AOC. I believe that has a fee too. I don't know, but it's been a while since we've had that, but a lot of new commissioners attend that, both county college and new commissioner orientations. There may be some additional charges in workshops and conferences. Next budget after that, unless you have questions, is central services. Most of the internal functions involving office equipment, postage, photocopying, telephones, those things show up within this budget. We have small central stores that budgets access to. The motor pool exists within this budget. So you have monies for fuels and vehicle maintenance and that. You have a capital outlay for vehicles. We usually tend to buy program cars in the range of $20,000 to $25,000. So there's the ability to add one or two, definitely at least one, if not two, program vehicles, depending on the needs within the county. I think FTE remain the same there. Next one after that begins the list of building maintenance programs that we have. Internally, we charge rent for the courthouse complex in the academy building, and then we charge individual programs of rent depending on the building they're located in also. So academy building maintenance is basically the existing academy building. It is primarily 85–90% behavioral health, and the remaining percentage belongs to public health. Those are the only two departments that are located in the main academy building. We'll later talk about the academy annex, which houses another program primarily crisis functions on the adjacent or on the property where the academy building is located, and our newest building that we have built as a county. FT, they consist of primarily building maintenance people and custodial, and some management. I believe part of Matt shows up in there. I think you're spread. I know definitely we have our lead building maintenance person, Heath, who shows up in there and those things. But again, pretty much a status quo budget. We've seen utility prices level off for the previous year or two. They were going up steeply, but I believe Dallas is considering a new $20 add-on to their water bills. So that'll be new utility costs that we'll have to address. Next one after this is the jail maintenance. Hard to believe, but it's been 30 years since we passed the jail bond to build the jail. It's almost a 30-year-old building now. It was opened in 2018 in August, I believe. So getting closer to 30 years. We've had some major infrastructure maintenance issues during that time, and we'll continue to have pretty big ticket items for building maintenance when it comes to operation of the jail of the building itself. Utilities are the biggest function of that. Have $210,000 for utilities. When you have about 45 toilets in a facility, you tend to pay some bigger than normal sewer bills. And when you have 24 operation, your electric bill goes up a little too. So that's the biggest hefty one there. You do have 2 custodians or 2.5 custodians. We do custodial work for the courtroom there as part of the agreement with the state to not charge rent to the judicial system and to cover all building maintenance and all those functions. The next building after that, we've referred to as the Buchanan building. That's where community corrections, IT, and juvenile are located. It's near the post office, a block and a half away. Operations of that is virtually the same as it was last year. Those 3 departments have an internal rent charge that they pay for. So the rent for this group didn't increase very much. You can see it was like $10,000. So very pretty efficient building to operate. You can see that utilities are around $35,000 for that building, and a lot of the IT functions, at least energy-wise, are operating 24/7. So and above normal heating and cooling over there too. So next one after that is the Resource Center building maintenance. That's the new building we built in the S-curves over in Monmouth Independence area near the Ross. That's where Family and Community Outreach is located, and a lot of partner agencies, creating basically a one-stop shop for a lot of clients that show up. They're able to address most of their needs. It's rare that you have that ability in other counties. So it's really beneficial to the clientele that show up there. They also provide some food services there in providing emergency food baskets for people if they come in with that need. We do get both rental income and internal charges for rent at the Resource Center. We have probably 10 to 12 different agencies that either are there a day and pay a certain amount of rent, or are there on a permanent basis to pay a corresponding amount of rent. The newest building that we built is the Academy Annex.
Interrupt 1 second.
Okay.
I just want to note that the charges for service rentals with partners is more than paying for the maintenance of the building.
Yeah.
So well done, everybody devising that business model. Wish we could repeat that with other buildings, but it's not appropriate. But just want to really note that and say kudos to all who were involved in that business model.
Yeah, I mean, when we decided to build in that facility over there, there was a lot of pre-planning for that building, and we realized a lot of the services that Brent provided. A majority of his clientele were in the Monmouth Independence area, so that was an ideal location to locate, and I think it's flourished very well. We, in the beginning, had a health clinic there. We don't have one right now. I believe we're in the process of trying to find a partner or something that could fill that space. But overall, I think it's been a big success, at least in the prevention arena, to reduce issues, other issues that would put burdens on the system. So
Big thanks to the partners there, Community Action, ODHS, et cetera, et cetera.
yep.
Great.
Academy Annex, like I said, is the newest building that we built. We're only in the first year of its operation. We don't have really good history, so we're kind of like exactly where we were when we proposed and adopted this budget last year. It does look like you can see that I reduced utilities by 5,000, at least our current bills, partly because we had a pretty mild winter. We're going to fall below that 40,000. We're probably going to fall below 35, but I just don't have enough data. So I wanted to make sure FTE wise, you have basically a custodian and part of a maintenance supervisor over there. So overall, and this rent is charged out within behavioral health. So they pay for all the maintenance on and custodial on that building. The last building is courthouse maintenance. It looks like a lot of bodies are in this budget for maintenance and that, but we also provide maintenance to Public Works, which is outside this building. We provide maintenance to another smaller office for behavioral health in the Monmouth area, and we provide maintenance and custodial for the West Salem satellite office that we have for behavioral health. So all those individuals are also included in this budget. They aren't all located within the courthouse complex and that. And then we have part of a supervisor and custodial supervisor and those things. They get spread out and those things. You can see our biggest cost operationally, other than bodies to maintain the facility, is utilities, like it is in most buildings. We try to address normal maintenance items within this budget, but some of our more major things occur in the building maintenance budget. So that is it for the building maintenance departments. And then the next one is information services, or IT. You can see that this budget continues to grow as we are trying to scramble both to find bodies to fill positions and to address the ever increasing costs associated with software maintenance or data storage and those things. We do provide services to two outside entities. We provide services to Polk Fire One, and we provide IT services to the city of Dallas. We used to provide services to Monmouth, but that process ended this fiscal year. So the two outside entities will be City of Dallas and Polk Fire One. They pay corresponding amounts of money for the service they receive. If they need extra service, they're charged on an hourly basis beyond the contract amount. Currently, we're looking at migration in software from Google to Microsoft. We're looking at cybersecurity. We're looking at, and as these costs continue to go up and we can't continue to afford those costs, we look at other measures to try to, address. We are now buying maintenance in 3-year packages, trying to get the savings they credit us with for buying multi-year. But it's those kind of things that we're looking at and doing. Right now, we probably should replace a server, but the cost of servers with chip issues don't even want to try. So not that we need to have a server, but it's just better to replace. They aren't failing or anything like that. It's getting tougher and tougher to meet the needs of the IT department. And as departments demand more and more in software and technological advances, gets harder, both policy-wise and ability to maintain all the things we have. More buildings mean more door locks, more cameras, more everything. And all this funnels through IT, and it's just getting to be difficult to maintain that. Next budget after that, unless you have questions, is GIS.
I have a quick question on.
Okay,
Right.
go ahead.
I'm seeing about a 50% or so increase from 23-24 to now, and I understand the costs. Kind of in line with Commissioner Pope's earlier questions, what is that? What is the trend there? Are we gonna plateau a bit?
You're looking at the history, and that's
Yeah.
artificial false history. We used ARPA money for cybersecurity for those 2 previous years that you see in the 200.
Gotcha.
When ARPA money went away, we had to bear the full brunt of the cybersecurity and the maintenance and those things. Where's the trend line? As the sheriff stated, up. Software companies have you where they want you, and your dependence on them is, you're just dependent on the software companies, the data storage. The cloud is a wonderful investment or invention, but it's not free. And they know it, and they have you. And to switch any type of software system is usually a very costly and painful process, not only in the amount of people time it takes, but going a different route. And in some cases, we have permanent record storage, for things like the body cams and for DA evidence and those things. The DA collects body cam information from every entity that has a police force. And we are now looking at 75 terabytes of information that we have in storage. It just explodes. I wish, and
Years, been years.
when you start,
Things been here.
body cam's a good idea. Oh yeah, but you don't realize what that cost is.
In terms of retention requirements, I'm sure that varies depending on what.
Morgan would know for sure.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Minimum of 10 years.
I'm assuming that's going to compound over time versus stay flat.
It could. The other thing that is becoming more and more difficult, because we have all this storage, when we get public records requests, it takes a lot of staff time because we store everything. So now you're digging through what used to be in paper files. You're digging through tons and tons of data, and then you have to filter that data because everything they're asking for needs to be specific to what they're asking and not giving them more information. And some of our information is not able to be handed out. So you're spending time doing that. So simple records requests takes a lot of time. Caitlin's probably gotten 5 or 6 in the last.
I've gotten that in the last 2 weeks.
So, you're devoting a lot of your time just addressing, and we don't have the luxury of saying, no. I mean, we can attach a cost to it and that, but if they're willing to pay, we have to do the work. So.
Lawyers mess everything up.
I didn't want to say that, but they haven't helped. The whole system hasn't helped, and the ability to have that information just compounds it.
I imagine the liability for each municipality or entity prevents us from finding economies of scale to sort of consolidate some of that storage capacity.
Correct.
It's very risky. It's just, yeah, interesting.
Yes, we've created our own monsters in a lot of cases.
Very good.
And some you don't even think about, and then they bite you 2 years, 5 years later. But that's what we've done. GIS is the next program budget. That one stays pretty flat. That's obviously our geographic information system that we created back in early 90s, and has been a valuable tool, not only for public works and the assessor's office and the general public, but has also been a pretty valuable tool during emergencies. Not only with giving the information, but reporting for things that when you're seeking FEMA reimbursement on emergency declarations, that you're able to tag those things and identify in a much easier fashion. So it's been a great decision that we made way back when. It was one of the biggest decisions we ever made back in the early 90s, going in that direction. And I believe it's been a very valuable. We just saw some GIS stuff yesterday, showing maps of broadband and where we were deficient before we started and after the work we did, how much more of the county is covered with the ability to have broadband and wireless connectivity in the rural areas. That's the technology to program budgets. The next one is finance budget. This has a majority of our county finance people in it. Caitlin shows up in here. I show up in here, or a chunk of me shows up in here. We're pretty much at the same FTE level. When Caitlin started here, how many years now? 5? She's had well over 100% turnover in the office. This includes payroll. This includes her staff upstairs. She has a very good crew working up there and down here. But again, this includes the county audits in here. You can see that this budget didn't grow much. It's pretty much a status quo budget. So audits aren't getting cheaper, and if we had to pay for them by the amount of paper, they've gotten a lot thicker too, as CPAs cause a lot of problems too, and increase the amount of stuff you have to report on and account for and those. The other thing is ARPA and all those things weren't report free. They required a lot of, even free money requires a lot of reporting and those things. So if people say, well, you got a bunch of free money, nothing's truly free in our world because of reporting requirements and that. So, but we've had clean audits forever. They do a good job, and Caitlin's doing a good job learning everything, having to defend government accounting from her previous world, saying how stupid we do things, and I agree, but it is what it is in government accounting. The next one is human resources. Nothing's changed in human resources. Oregon laws have never changed. OFLA-FEMLA's never changed. It's a constant flux of new rules and new abilities for people to take time off and to track all the things that are going on in our wonderful state and all the opportunities that employees have that they didn't have a while ago, which requires a lot of paperwork and other things. Matt has two bodies and himself in this budget, and you know, they do a very good job. One of those bodies is reimbursed primarily by behavioral health because that's how much activity is involved in behavioral health, both recruiting wise and just dealing with that big of department. So you'll see charges for services at around 115,000. That's primarily reimbursement from behavioral health. And then you can see that software costs in this program are fairly high. We utilize electronic recruitments and that. That's not free. And they all come up with a whole bunch of new things and bug Matt, hey, you want this or you want that? And it's easier for them to say no when we don't have money, but there are things out there that they're trying to push as a group. But overall, HR is doing a good job. Like I said, Matt sits in on all labor negotiations that we have. We're spending a lot of time on that now and briefing the board constantly on labor negotiations. Hopefully we get them staggered so we don't have three at a time in the future. But overall, pretty good shape in HR. The last budget within management services is county council, a necessary evil. You know, always have to have your lawyer. Can't live with them, can't live without them. But most of Morgan's salary is in here. Some of it shows up in the insurance fund. He does provide some assistance to the housing authority. They pay us $1,000 a month. So you see a $12,000 figure. We haven't raised that in a while. It's something we could, but it's not going to make or break or do much for us. This is primarily, low management or materials and services budget. It's just primarily Morgan. He attends one or two conferences a year, primarily to maintain continuing education requirements. He gets most of those attending the two county council meetings that they have a year. So overall, like I said, pretty much a status quo budget again. That is management services in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have any questions of Caitlin, she'd be more than happy to answer.
Any questions or discussions? Do we have a motion?
A big slate. do one big slate of approvals.
I always like the easy way.
Yeah. I moved to approve tentative approval for all management services.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. We are adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
I'll just give you a quick overview, though. You added, I believe, 3 items to the wish list.
Yes.
One would be the investigator for the DA. You also added the jail management system for the sheriff jail. And then I believe we added 1 vehicle on the patrol side. Those were the wish list items. I didn't assign numbers to those, but I can. Your investigator with benefits and that's probably going to cost you somewhere between probably a total of $120,000 when you include everything. The jail management system is going to be, it'll be more than 38,000 when it's all said and done. But I'll just assign 40,000 to that. And the vehicle, when I put their budget together, I cut his $90,000 request to 60,000, which is kind of 1.5 vehicles, or 1 1/3 vehicles. So you probably only need to add $30,000 for that vehicle. I believe I retained the outfitting of those vehicles in his M&S budget, so you wouldn't have to increase that. So you probably got a number of $30,000 for that wish list item when you consider it at the end of our process. And then I wrote it down as discussion, but the PERS fund and the direction I need to go, I'll probably have to come back with something. Hopefully I have it tomorrow morning, that will tell you what the ramifications of that will be. In the Public Works Fund, it'll just reduce the contingency, and in behavioral health, it will just reduce the contingency. In general fund, it will probably need to be a combination of reducing some of the contingency, but mostly layoffs. If we don't make that transfer. So I'll work with Caitlin this afternoon and we should have something there. But the other funds, I think we also did one to maybe construction fund or something like that. Well, those will only affect contingencies. You haven't approved either of those 2 budgets, but whatever that amount is, it will just lower it by that amount. So after that, now we can adjourn if you're.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. We're adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
We do have public comment at 10:30 time certain for tomorrow. So anyone in the public can address budget committee with concerns or advocacy or whatever they want. But that is the time for the